Good afternoon, race fans, and welcome to round 2 of the HCCL Karussell Cup live exclusively via TRTN. As always, I'm Regan Clark. You join us for our second trip of 3 here in the Karussell Cup calendar back to the Nürburgring Nordschleife. Another 170 turns and 15.7 miles of FIA Grade 3 to tackle in today's second round of the championship. Taking a look at what division we find ourselves in today, we've moved away from the M2 Cups from last week and now move over to the GT4s for an extended 75 minutes of racing. That's an hour and 15 minutes for today. No other alterations though to the current itinerary in regards to the session lengths. Getting a look there at the regulations, it's 20 minutes of free practice, of which we're already 5 minutes through due to latent technical difficulties. Then we're on to 20 minutes of qualifying, and then of course the feature event, 75 minutes of racing back again at the Nordschleife. This time around though, we'll find ourselves in slightly faster machines for this tour of the Nürburgring, as we see on board here with James Mason making his way through the Vidal chicane in the GP Strecker. We're on with the SRO GT4s, the sort of cost-effective barrier for Grand Touring racing. The GT4s are much closer to production-ready models, maybe not to the same extent as the M2s as we saw last weekend, but definitely a lot closer of a pitch when compared to their big brothers that we'll see the next weekend over in GT3. These are some fantastic machines. We're seeing north of 400 horsepower out of some units today, with as low as about 360. We see into the wall though, already off to serious troubles. The 413 of James Mason with a sizable tank slapper there as he made his way into the Hatzenbecks. He's back into the pit lane, so we're going to try and catch on board with another driver out on track at the moment. I believe we have one of our new drivers here to take a look at as we just review that incident there for Mason. So on board now with Manuel Lamoth in the number 91. He's one of several new drivers for this round. We are seeing a little bit of desync here. Hopefully that will sort itself out. He's making his way out towards the Kiedelbacher Hohe. Just on the exit now of Hoheneichen. With Luca Tamburini here in the number 813. Wasn't able to make an appearance last round, and that's been the case for quite a few drivers on this grid, of course, due to last week's issues with technical difficulties for PlayStation Network users. We found ourselves with a sizable decrease in the grid size, but hopefully for today, as we're seeing already 15 drivers available in the session, hopefully more by the end of free practice, we do have a much more interesting scope of things to take a look at. Let's start things off then with balance of performance for our GT4s today. There's obviously not much to discuss last week in a single make M2 race. We find ourselves with a whole cornucopia of available tweaks for the run here at the Nürburgring. Ginetta find themselves on the top end of things with 40 kilos shed off of what is already one of the lightest GT4s in circulation, the G55. That's 40 kilos reduced. BMW working with just over half of that limit with 24 kilos. Aston Martin half of what Ginetta's getting, 20 kilos reduced on the V8 Vantage. A lot of negatives, very few positives in terms of weight gain here. As we look further down the list, Audi losing 17 kilos, Alpine losing 10, Porsche losing 8, Chevrolet losing 4, and Mercedes losing 2. And then into the positives, Maserati set to gain 14 kilos, McLaren set to gain a whopping 22 kilo ballast. Now, we're no strangers to the GT4s here on HCCL. Of course, we were here to cover the entirety of the GT4 Challenge, of which we saw a measured state of domination out of Chevrolet's Christian Lebay. But he wasn't alone in that fight. Vladislav Mizin of Mercedes-AMG and Asahi Ota of Aston Martin, as well as some featured talents in there as well, such as some victories for Anthony Villorio of McLaren. Did see quite an interesting championship indeed. That's also spread over the results we saw in another GT4 championship, this one being over on the Competizione Performance League, the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. We just see there a bit of a tank slapper for Luca Tamburini as he made his way down through Kallenhard in towards Versailles and Exmuller. Take a look here. We see this is a broadly different state of affairs for Steven Sutton. The last time we saw the number 7, he was behind the wheel of a Mercedes AMG in GT4, but now he finds himself a little bit more comfortable with the offerings out of Woking, Surrey, that of the McLaren 570S. It's going to be exciting to see how he fares in today's coming qualifying session at 11.5 minutes before we get to that mark, and it won't be an extended qualifier like we saw for the M2s. The GT4s can handle it, and we will be expecting to see in and around the range of 2 available flying laps out of our drivers in today's coming qualifying session. So still very thin margins for success in qualifying, but that has not taken away from what looks to be, according to our data, a very close quali coming up not too far from now. We take a look around the grid here. We see this is Tom Breuer in the number 159. Making his way currently up towards, by looking at it here on the map, he's just on his way up towards, looking at it here, this is the Adnar Forst. Up in front of him there's Fabian Hodek in the number 822, not far up the road as well. This is going to be an interesting one to discuss, as you also see here Sahiota back behind the wheel of his iconic 55 Aston Martin, but you'll note slight changes in the colour scheme here. Now, they're trying to sort of call his bluff on this one. Of course, the last one we saw was very much so the podium green with that light green accent that we've seen on the Aston Martin, even the safety cars in Formula 1. But this one, dare I say it, the strokes of sort of a darker red. It's giving off DBR9 vibes. If those of you remember, the Aston Martin DBR9 was based off the DB9 model, and that competed at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in the late 2000s. It was later converted to the DBRS9 for use in GT3. When the latter GT1 regs fell apart. So that is definitely what's reminding me of there. And of course, he's changed up from the 54 back to the 55. We see Thomas Ferret behind the wheel of some mighty French machinery here. The Renault Alpine A110, powered by a 1.8 litre turbo inline 4 mounted at the back. And it is an absolute juggernaut. We've seen in the hands of other drivers over the course of, in fact, the GT4 Challenge Series, it was a real showstopper. I think one such performance that springs to mind was that of Alberto Aragonesi's when he drove in the 104 Alpine A110 back in the GT4 Challenge. Admittedly, things did go sour in the latter part of the race for the 104, but he had an absolute rocker first half. So looking forward to seeing what Ferret can do, because he had albeit a bit of a mixed bag, but a sensational opening race here in the Karussell Cup. Now, this is the point I want to address. Pascal Stolz had a showstopper qualifying last round in the M2s, but it all came apart for the German talent right in the opening lap. And will it be the same here, as this is actually the first we've ever seen it, on board here with Stolz, as he makes his way currently down towards, by looking at it here on the map, Kesselchen and Mutzkurve, and towards Klostertal and Steilstrecke. You see here, this is a very bizarre sight for us, because not often is it that we get to see a Maserati on the grid. This is the first of its kind for us here. This is the Gran Turismo MC GT4, and so I've been told it is an absolute showstopper vehicle. Very rough around the edges, practically feral machinery we're dealing with up against the rest of GT4. So I'm told this thing has very few, if any, assists available. So it's a very raw, very visceral driving experience. So for a driver like Stolz, who we've already seen has a decent hand of things here at the Nürburgring in terms of pace over longevity, this could be quite an interesting scale up here for the 172. This is a broadly different direction to what we were expecting Stolz to be heading toward. He's currently being tailed here by Fabian Hodek, a new driver for the championship. Hodek in the 822, and he's actually on the qualifying charts, not far off of a pretty solid starting position, all things considered. So we'll talk about that in about 8 minutes time here. Looking around the field, Mr. Scallops behind the wheel of the Mercedes AMG GT4, of course powered by the Mercedes M178 4-litre twin-turbo V8 engine. Was later licensed over to Aston Martin as the M177 that you find under the bonnet of, if we can go and find one of them on track here, you'll find under the bonnet of, if we can find it, the V8 Vantage. Notably, when we scroll past there, of course, we've got a myriad of Porsches, and one that I am thoroughly looking forward to seeing here is that of Matthew Copsey, because, of course, as we saw back in that last round, Copsey ended up taking the win outright in the M2 division, a very exciting chapter of the championship. And speaking of the championship, let's get a look at the championship standings, because all of these do count towards a Karussell Cup championship title. And with Matthew Copsey, of his inaugural win in round one, he takes the lead with 45 points. He's up the road from Mr. Scallops in second, Sahiota in third place, with Thomas Ferret in fourth, and it's all still very close. Oh my goodness, very close margins there, as the 97 finds a real spot to bother heading down towards Adnar Forst. Tom Wells in fifth place, Stephen Sutton in sixth, Casey Miles in seventh place, with Bayer in eighth, Villorio in ninth. So there's only 9 scoring points here out of that first round. Now, of course, you could definitely take into consideration that it was because of those reduced grid numbers, and it was because even with the grid of its size, it was quite a slaughterhouse here at the Nürburgring. This is Joop Overbeek. Joop Overbeek. I'm still trying to get to grips with all of the new names here, because of course this is double the size of the grid we got last weekend, so a lot of new faces to get used to. a lot of people joining the grid here. This is Miguel Silva in the number 31 Porsche, making his way currently down towards Schwedenkreuz. Tom Breuer in the 159. We've got Václav Pospisil in the number 34. Heinz Harzer in the number 22. Of course, Asahi Ota has now moved away from using the 54, now moves back to his iconic 55. Things are definitely going to be ramping up here because they've let Asahi Ota really back into his prime choice of machinery. That 55 was a dangerous presence on the grid. Took the inaugural round win in Monza amidst rainy conditions in a fight against Christian Lebay, who later went on to win the GT4 Challenge Championship, not by a particularly long way as well. Asahi Ota was one of several drivers to give him very rich competition over the course of that season. So now, to leave him in his element here with what is definitely his most preferred choice of machine, it could be a very, very lively performance to be expected today out of Asahi Ota, as well as several drivers on the grid, for that matter. And I think that's the wonderful nature that we find ourselves in with this grid. We have a lot of drivers who we've just simply not seen before, or driver and car combinations we've still yet to study. So with some drivers, for example, like Thomas Ferre, we've seen him last weekend and we saw him to be a very solid talent in the M2s. Now we get to see what he can do with the titular Alpine, currently the only one in this entire grid. And there are a few run of one-off choices here. The Audi of Rafael Bayer and the number 28, the number 41 Chevrolet of Anthony Valorio. Looking further around the grid, you've also got the Maserati of Pascal Stoltz. Dare I say it, I am surprised to be seeing him that far up the order in a Maserati. Currently leading this session is Fabian Hodek in the number 822 Mercedes AMG by 6.1 seconds, no less. With times like that, it is definitely leaving a lot up to the imagination. Fabian Hodek could take, looking at the qualifying predictions just ahead of time here, that could easily be the chances of a pole position here for Hodek. Do keep an eye out for this one. As I say that, Mr. Scallops crosses the line to make it a Mercedes 1-2 by 1.255 of a second. 1.255 seconds, I should say. And 8 minutes 56.675 for the 394. Mr. Scallops now into the fastest time of free practice. We also see on the last lap just gone, Rafael Bayer up to third fastest. Was previously in that second fastest spot behind Hodek, now to the back of the podium in today's free practice times. But it's a very good sign for Audi, all things considered. Of course, last of the 5.2 V10s, as Audi and Lamborghini, by contrast, were the last two to have been really running the V10 in a mainstay position in GT racing before Audi's program fizzled out and Lamborghini moved over to the V8 engine with the brand new Temerario GT3. So it is a bit of a bittersweet feeling seeing that V10 and hearing that V10 more impressively back on the grid. It's such a rare sensation now. Very, very rarely do we get to see V10s on a competitive grid such as today, and let alone to be seeing them gunning towards that top row, I would say. Sim Racing Hodek in our chat at the moment saying many different manufacturers love it. Yeah, it's great to see the variety here, and of course anything's an improvement over single make from last weekend, but really that is the beauty, I think, of GT4 over many other categories. It is probably in ACC's lineup of cars at least the most diverse ensemble of vehicles that you can hope to get on a grid. I mean, you've got Grand Tourers, you've got supercars, you've got more luxurious style GTs over the more technical ones out of AMG, you've got track toys, you've got sort of everyday super saloons, you've got proper high-end supercars, you've got, I mean, even little sports cars like that of Alpine, and then you've got American muscle. That's not considering the stuff that we've yet to discuss that could be on this grid as well. You've got the KTM Crossbow to consider as well, which I don't believe anyone signed up in, sadly. You've also got cars that are in GT4 but sadly aren't included in this game. You've got more American muscle from the Ford Motor Company. Their 7th generation Mustang now has a GT4 variant. You've got sort of pedigree sports category cars like Lotus's Emira. And you've also got sort of a proper high-end Japanese steel like Toyota's GR Supra. Many different brands, though, congregate under the veil of GT4 racing. It is really a sort of almost a rich man's touring car, isn't it? It's very, very flashy when you compare it to other forms of motor racing, but make no mistake of it, while the exteriors of these cars are flashy and it's definitely a more opulent scene than your standard white knuckle touring car race, that really does not diminish from the attitudes of the drivers today. We have seen GT4s properly bend steel around many different locations in the GT4 Challenge and also over on Competizione Performance League's GT4 Pro-Am Cup America series, of which we covered in its entirety and is available on the TRTN YouTube channel. We have seen the GT4s to be arguably the most competitive branch of vehicles in ACC, and I hold that with pretty solid conviction here because the racing we have been able to obtain out of GT4 in such a short amount of time rivals that of GT3, which we've been covering here on TRTN for coming up on 2 years. So there is a lot of excitement from us here coming into this round. I imagine it's the same feeling for those tuning in at home or even those tuning in from the track itself. We know a lot of drivers like to tune in and watch these races on the fly whilst they're out on track. We've just seen joining the session as well in the 104. That's Alberto Aragonese. He's a driver we spoke about not actually too long ago. And that was in his performance in the GT4 Challenge with Alpine. So it definitely puzzles me, at least, to see him opt for Mercedes. But when you take a look at the metrics right now, Mercedes are leading this session outright by a factor of multiple seconds here to the nearest manufacturer, that being Audi. Then Maserati 4th, Porsche 5th, courtesy of Manuel Amoff. And Heinz Harzer puts Aston Martin in 6th place. The rest having yet to set times here. And we've seen that this is a growing trend. At least a lot of drivers are staying in the pit lane. Some have tried to take sighting laps, but nothing too serious. As we've seen for James Mason, we saw him out on track earlier, but he had that sizable incident right before we got on with some of the other drivers today. He's one of the only drivers, so it seems here, to be fielding for BMW in the M4 GT4. Of course, this is the previous generation model M4. Now we know that BMW uses the later gen model that's used over it in GT3. They now also have a GT4 variant for that. We'll be getting on to the talks of qualifying in a moment's time. Of course, as mentioned in the itinerary, it's 20 minutes of quali coming up here at the Nordschleife. That's giving our drivers functionally 2 laps to fight for it here. We see that Václav Pospisil just put Aston Martin for 3rd fastest at the end of today's free practice session. So it's leaving very hopeful signs here for the Czech talent in the number 34. Heading into today's qualifying session. This will be Pospisil's first quali of the Karussell Cup, so a lot of expectations riding high here, and that's the same story for that of Fabian Hodek in the number 822, because he'll be going up against Mr. Scallop, so it seems there for control of pole position. But with only really 2 laps to play for, it is a bit of an old Western gunslinger draw between these drivers to see who is really the fastest hand in the Nordschleife. And let's get on to that discussion in a moment's time. We still do have a few drivers heading down towards the line here. Among them is James Mason. He's out through Galgenkopf as we speak, making his way onto the Dottinger Ruhr. We stay on board here just briefly with the BMW. You've seen him many a time before, James Mason, throughout both HCCL and also over on NLRL. We know what his talents are capable of, and I think it was just maybe a sort of day to forget for him last weekend. Obviously was sadly a DNF for Mason last weekend in his time with the M2s, but he gets to upgrade now. From the little brother comes the big brother, the M4, making its way onto the stage then as we make our way down towards the line. Just on the exit there, Tiergarten on his way to the line. Where does Mason position BMW amongst the ranks here? To the line goes the 413 at the end of free practice, and it's 5th fastest. So an impressive start to today on an 18-car grid. Nothing to scoff at there for the 413. Of 8 available times, he's made his way just beneath the mark for that top 50%, but he's still aiming high here, and you can definitely expect to see the 413 pick up a little bit more steam heading into qualifying, since obviously he was down on a bit of a dud lap with that incident earlier on today. We're seeing down towards the line now, making his way out of Antonio Spucher into Tiergarten. This is the 172 of Pascal Stolz. Now, we know what his credibility is like in terms of qualifying here at the Nürburgring Nordschleife. We know already that he is front-running material, but can he do it 2 weeks on the trot, this time behind the wheel of what is GT4's arguably most difficult car to manage, the 172 being the Maserati MC. And as he takes it to third place, I think the chances are looking mighty likely here for Stoltz to potentially gun for back-to-back pole positions. The question therein remains, unlike last weekend, can he hold his mettle down towards the end of that first lap where things all went wrong down at Tiergarten? Well, if today's free practice session has been any indication, things are looking very, very likely for Pascal Stoltz to fight at least for the front row. But he's got ample company out of Mercedes-AMG today, and when you consider those balance of performance tweaks, again, Maserati is only one of two manufacturers to really be seeing any kind of detriment today. They've got 14 kilos against them, with McLaren having 22 kilos, Mercedes in the negatives. So they're playing against a bit of a rigged hand here, Maserati, with their singular 172 MC. So we wait to see, really, what is going to go on for this session. Jurpo Verbeek crossed the line not too long ago, but sadly to no valid times on the charts there. For his first qualifying session coming up, he'll have high expectations of what he's capable of. And with a swarm of Porsches, I should add that the Porsche 718 Cayman is quickly becoming the most popular GT4 for HCCL. I think really giving them any kind of run for their money right now is Mercedes with 3 cars, Porsche fielding 5. That being Overbeek, Silva, Tamburini, Copsey, and Lamoth. We sort of wait to see then what is going to happen for qualifying. It's been a bit of a late start to quali. I'm not entirely sure what's gone on there. I think it is because we still have drivers out on track. Rafael Bayer at the back of the top 5, having recently been displaced by both Václav Pospisil and Pascal Stoltz for 3rd, then 4th. He's not particularly happy with the way things have been panning out, but he's still very close. You can see the margins that sit between himself and Stoltz as a factor of about 1.498 seconds there. So still very, very close when you consider the breadth of the Nürburgring. 15.7 miles and 170 turns in all, comprising both the Nordschleife and the GP Strecke in its entirety. With that layout being introduced only 23 years ago, with the Nürburgring Nordschleife itself having existed since 1927. Looking at the charts there. It is bizarre to think then that that full combined layout has not really been around too long, but has already grown to be one of motorsports' most iconic endurance venues. It's definitely part of that sort of holy trinity one could consider up there with Le Mans, and I would probably say Daytona as part of that iconic trio of endurance races. Some could make the argument as well, the Spa 24 hours. I'd definitely say, though, if we're going to be talking sort of a mainland Europe question here, it's going to be France and it's going to be Germany. With no offence to the Belgians and the mighty Spa-Francorchamps, I don't think it holds a candle to the N24 and the 24 Hours of Le Mans. So if we're talking Holy Trinity material, you're right here on hallowed ground at the Nürburgring Nordschleife. You can see, though, the swarm of cars still yet to have set any times at the end of free practice, and we're hoping to see a little bit more activity out of those heading into this qualifying session. Now, for some drivers, obviously, it made some sense. We did see them out on track, but things have obviously gone sour for them over the course of what was a very limited number of available laps. And it's the same story here. And one driver I'm surprised to see among them was a driver we've held to very high regard throughout qualifying sessions and throughout race days. It's been that of Asahi Ota. He's on familiar ground with Aston Martin, but something seemingly just didn't click for him, perhaps, over the course of free practice, or maybe it was more of a sighting situation, a bit of a recce of the course to give himself the best running chance heading into qualifying today. We're back on board with Rafael Bayer, and this is the one driver we're waiting to see to the line here, the number 28 Audi, currently 5th fastest, previously 4th. Both him and Václav Pospisil forced down a peg by Pascal Stoltz's most recent 3rd place time for Maserati. You see him, though. He's out through the Schwabenschwanz in towards the Kleines Karussell. It is a mighty tone out of that 5.2 litre. In terms of the V10 engines out of Audi and by proxy Lamborghini, I was always a bit more fond of the older 5-litre you saw in the very early Gen Gallardos and the first generation model R8, but I'll be damned if the 5.2 doesn't at least have a very iconic tone in the world of motorsports. There aren't really many engines like it. And the Dottinger then goes the Audi. Well, good things come to those who wait. With the 28 making his way out through Tiergarten, Raphael Bayer down towards the line. We'll see where his time is later on today, as not far from now is the start of 20 minutes of qualifying here for round 2 of the Karussell Cup. Across the line then goes Raphael Bayer. We'll see where he stacks up later on today. Well, lights are green and the grid is lively, as we see here with Pascal Stolz already swarmed with Mr. Scallops right behind him. Then up in front of him there is Manuel Lamoth in the number 91 up the road as well. Fabian Hodek and Stephen Sutton, as we see, making our way out onto the grid. Leading that charge, though, I mean, who else really would you expect it to be in terms of the front runners right out of the gates for early doors of qualifying, but the 413, who's come to be known really as the early bird of qualifying. It's James Mason with BMW making his way down towards the Ford curve. Trailing from him there, Matthew Copsey, last round's race winner and current championship leader here in the Karussell Cup. Then behind him, Stephen Sutton, Fabian Hodek and Manuel Lamoth for our first 5 times if they are to continue in order. So making his way out towards the Schumacher S's here in the GP Strecker. And down towards Bitten Warsteiner. Of course, with these BMWs, this one, the M4, this particular model introduced in 2017, developed in-house by BMW M Sport. Features a 3-litre BMW S55 twin-turbo inline-6, making 425 horsepower. Now, you'll note the S55 was the same power plant we found in last weekend's offerings, that being the M2. So these were admittedly a bit of a down-tuned version of that, making only 365. This one beefed all the way up to 425 brake horsepower. Does give the M4 quite an extra shove. Now we see onto the flying laps is James Mason. We'll discuss tech regs a little later on, as let's get on to the real meat and potatoes of this session, the qualifying predictions. Mr. Scallops predicted at pole position with an 8 minutes 58.240. Christian Lebay was predicted at second place, but at the moment, correct me if I'm wrong, he's not present on today's grid. We'll hope to see that change in a moment's time. Pascal Stolz predicted then at third place. If Lebay is a no-show, that could be bumped up to second for him in the Audi, not in the Audi, sorry, in the Maserati. We were thinking of Raphael Bayer, my mistake there. Pascal Stolz with Maserati could be moving up to second place then if Lebay is a registered no-show. Stephen Sutton in 4th with Fabian Hodek in 5th. James Mason on your screens at the moment is predicted to be in that top 10 at the very least here. Predicted at 6th with a 901.635. Thomas Ferre in 7th with Václav Pospisil in 8th. Anthony Valorio predicted in 9th. Now, there are a lot of gaps there in the data. That's factoring for only 9 times of which we could sample off of Simbot on a grid of 18 cars. So that's a whole 50% neglected from the data, or not setting any data at all. So there's a lot left up in the air heading into qualifying today. We're seeing here with Mason on his way down through Hatzenbecksborg in towards the Vidal chicane. We'll be following him for a comprehensive tour of things. Fingers crossed all things go well for the number 413. We'll stay on board with James Mason to give us the breakdown of things. For those of you joining us for the first time, here comes the tour of the Nürburgring Nordschleife. Following on board then with James Mason, still the first among the fray in terms of our flying laps. We exit the GP Strecker and in towards the Hatzenbach section. This very twisty, tight section. Very, very tough to navigate with drivers on your tail. Very, very hard to navigate with anyone trying to look on either side of your car. So it's usually a front from back situation. Drivers often following the leader in through this area. Very hard to get side by side. Minimal overtaking opportunities. It's a hold on for dear life kind of situation here as we exit the Hatzenbach in towards Hoheneichen. See, in towards Hoheneichen here, up towards the run out through the Kiddelbacher Hoher now. up towards Flugplatz, one of the more iconic sections of the track. Very, very easy when in, especially the faster machines. We could expect to see this at GT3 next weekend, to see the front end catch a little bit of airtime through this area. In through Cottonborn. This is a fast straightaway section, and this is where cars like the M4 are going to see great advantage. Same story for McLaren, actually, as come to think of it. Heading down towards Schwedenkreuz then. Heavy braking zone following on from this fast left-hander as we get right down onto the anchors here for Arenberg and Poststrasse. Now on a run into a very easy to mistake area of the track. Now, it's super easy to overestimate what your car is capable of throughout the Nürburgring. It is paramount to make sure you understand your limits when you head down through this area here, as we head down through Fuchsrohr in towards the Adenauer Forst. Now, we've seen clips on the internet time in and time again of people failing to keep their car under control in this section of the track, and much like Brunchen, which we'll see later on, these are some serious action spots for drivers getting all out of shape. Fortunately for Mason, and also for Copsey on his tail at the moment, they find no such difficulty here on the exit of the Adenauer Forst in towards Metzgerfeld then, on our run in towards the forest area, starting off at Kallenhardt. Out through Metzgerfeld. Very easy to run onto that right-hand side there. Very little runoff at all. Very tight section of the track coming up here. As you can see on the signs, we're heading in towards Kallenhardt. Downhill right-hander here. Bit tough to get on the brakes and hold that line perfectly. As you'll see, the track starts to narrow up quite massively for our drivers here as we make our way down towards Verseifen. One of two hairpins in this section, another one coming up a little later on. So, in towards Verseifen. Then out through Exmüller. I would like to also make it explicitly aware the German you are hearing has not been performed by a professional. Out through the Ausfahrt Breitscheid. I mean, as evidenced by some of our last broadcasts, our grasp of anything besides the English language is a bit sparse. I will say that much, a bit sparse. We've had, not complaints, but had some pointers from our Dutch fans over the pronunciation of certain corners over at the circuit Zandvoort. We make our way out of Bergwerk now onto the Kesselchen and Mutkurve section. Another faster area of the track, and this is where, again, the M4 and the 570S will see great advantage over the rest of the grid. You could expect to see some troubles for Porsche and Alpine as they find themselves on the shorter end of the stick when it comes to straight line speed in GT4, and that'll be paramount when we head down the Dottinger Hohe a little later on. Heading down towards Mutkurve then. It's a very high commitment area here. A little dab on the brakes just to keep the car nice and tidy. Using a little bit of that runoff there. It's just touching the edges of the track. Nothing too crazy here. In through to Klostertal, now to Stahlstrecke. And into the very namesake of this series, heading up towards the Caracciolo Karussell, sometimes just called the Karussell. The very namesake of the HCCL Carousel Cup. In we go, tucking things in. Let's see how Mason tackles this one in the M4. And it's looking tidy for him. A little bit of washout there on the exit, following in his wake. You could also see running onto the inside apron there was the 97 of Matthew Copsey. We make our way up towards Hohe Acht. And again, I said this back in the M2s, but we are coming up to what is arguably the best section of the track here, heading out through Hedwigshöhe in towards Wippermann. Out through Hedwigshöhe. Then in towards Wippermann. Heading towards Eschbach. I can still never pronounce that. E-S-C-H Bach. Take of that what you will. In towards Brunchen. So this is another area we've seen so many people fail on. You can see this on the internet as well. It's a very popular spot. They film from exactly where our cameras are placed right now to watch the drivers come out through this area. Sometimes on the Touristenfahrten, they come in through that gravel section, catch a big chunk of gravel and spin into the wall and then end up on YouTube. Fortunately, our drivers hopefully won't be doing that today. In towards Flansgarten 1, then down towards the Sprunghügel. Now this is where you could expect to see some airtime. And there, that M4 got up on all four wheels by sounds of it there. He was completely a victim of gravity by the time he left the peak of things at Sprunghügel. In towards Flansgarten 2 then. You've noticed with Mason as well, and now I think this draws more from his experience in GT3s, he's very, very aggressive to the curbs, and this is the one thing that is going to be snipping away time from here. He's in through Schwalbenschwanz, and this is the area that he's going to find the most trouble with, is trying to figure out what curbs can I tackle and what curbs can't I. In through the Kleine Karussell, then out towards Galgenkopf. You can see, though, in the time that he's been lapping, Matthew Copsey has been gaining some time on him here. We'll see exactly where that 97 stacks up, because there has been a definite drawing factor here for the Porsche behind the BMW at the moment. Out through Galgenkopf and onto the Dottinger. Now, this is exactly where the gap is going to start opening up between Porsche and BMW. You can see right now it's already gone up from 2.6 to 2.8. It could, yes, start to draw up towards 2.9. Could it be 3.1, perhaps 3.2 seconds by the end of the straight before we get onto the braking zones proper down at Tiergarten? Out through Antoniusbucher. And yeah, 3.3 by looks of it there. So a little overestimation of things for us here. Heading down towards Tiergarten. Now, we saw things come apart for Pascal Stolz last weekend in the M2s, where he clattered against the wall here. And he was not alone in that assertion. A lot of other drivers found difficulty down at Tiergarten. Mason included by the looks of it there, as he bounces off of the curbs down towards the line then. After our tour of the Nürburgring Nordschleife for the second time in this championship, James Mason to the line. A 9 minutes, 114. Copsey behind him to the line. The 97 sadly didn't put a time on the charts, so that is a bit of a bizarre start for the session here. It has cut his available opportunities down by half. The 159 of Tom Breuer across the line, 8 minutes 53.377. A very, very solid time to start things off then. Thomas Ferre to the line, 9.8 seconds off of that time, but third fastest with Alpine. 55 coming to the line. Asahi Ota, second fastest for Aston Martin. And an 8 minutes 53. I don't think anyone saw that one coming. That is quite the long shot. We see another Maserati in the session. Now, that's Tom Wells. We used to see him quite often with Ginetta. This time he ditches the G55 on what could have been one of its best weekends for BOP to join Maserati. It's a real gamble. We'll see what the number 12 can do, though, as he looks to be late into the session. So, most recent highlights then. Asahi Ota, second fastest behind Tom Breuer. James Mason, third. And a top 5 to start things off, but it definitely looked like a bit of a dud lap there. 14.6 seconds off for Anthony Valorio with Chevrolet. And I must say, that is a striking livery. Don't get to see a lot of yellows left on the Camaro. I think people are a little too afraid of the comparison to Bumblebee from the Michael Bay Transformers films, but it's still a good colour. We need more yellow Chevys in this world. We really do. We really, really do. Can't get enough of them. The number 41 then, currently 5th. 22 across the line a moment ago. Heinz Harzer for Aston Martin finds himself 6th fastest, and he's 4 seconds behind Valorio in the 41 Chevrolet. 34 to the line. Here comes Václav Pospisil, but sadly, by looks of it there, it's a no valid lap for the 34. And you can see, compounding his efforts is nose damage on that Aston Martin, but he's not got any more time to play against it. He has to just continue on with the damage and hope he settles for a time at least in that top half of the grid, because things have severely fallen apart for him there. Most recent time then is Joop Overbeek in the 284, and then we saw Fabian Hodek in second place there as he crosses the line up the road from Asahi Ota, and 1.4 seconds from Tom Breuer's leading time. Now, McLaren were really up against it for BOP, so it is a real shock to the system to see Tom Breuer, who was a bit silent throughout free practice, to come soaring through here and blindside competition with a time like an 8:53. It leaves things plenty up in the ways for Breuer to take the lead of the championship here, because right now his closest comparator for the championship lead is Matthew Copsey, 45 points strong out of round 1. And if he can't even put a time on the charts here in that 97, he could be facing some serious trouble heading into round 2 of the championship, as things could flip on their head. He might still just hold on to the lead, but that really does remain to be seen here. So now 9 times on the charts there. Pascal Stolz also across the line there to 5th fastest. 104 nearest to the line, so we'll be catching on board here with Alberto Aragoneses. And he's third fastest, so that move away from Alpine was definitely a gamble worth taking for the 104. The Spaniard now third fastest behind Hodek and Breuer. What has been domination in the early parts of qualifying today. With only 5 minutes left to go, though, we have swiftly been flipped on our head here into the latter. That's his first time on the charts, and definitely one to remember, and with enough time to complete another flying lap, it does leave the chances up here for Alberto Aragoneses to fight for that front row. You can look at the gap between himself and Fabian Hodek. It's a factor of looking at it here. It's 267 thousandths of a second between second and third place, so really not too far a margin at all when you consider all 170 turns and 15.7 miles of tarmac to cover. See, though, for Aragoneses, it's all come asunder because caught in the aero wash of Rafael Bayer's Audi, finds himself into the Schumacher S's and back into the pit lane with no fighting chances left. And that's the same story for Fabian Hodek. He's contemptuous second place, knowing that it has been more than secured as of right now, and seemingly unable to hold a candle to what has been a show-stopping performance on entry for Tom Breuer in the number 159. Ooh, into the wall, the 159. That's the end of his qualifying session. Not that I think he'll be arguing too much with where he stands upon that grid, but I'm sure that Breuer was heading towards an improvement over an 853.377. Nonetheless, that is a showstopper out of Breuer. But could we be seeing a little bit of the same cruel fate that hit Pascal Stolz last weekend perhaps creep up on Breuer in today's race? We saw it was a very confident qualifier last weekend for Pascal Stolz, but down at Tiergarten in the first lap of the first race of the championship, it all came apart in a split second. That is the brutal and often unforgiving nature that surrounds a track like the Nürburgring Nordschleife. This isn't a kind of track to where you can crash and hope to come back from. It has to be perfect, or it has to be long enough to where perfection is no longer part of the equation. Since we find ourselves only with 75 minutes of racing, that's really not a long time here at the Nürburgring. Our drivers will be looking for the perfect lap. Some believe it theoretical, some believe it something that cannot exist. And our drivers will be praying for different. 97 in trouble. That's really big trouble here for Matthew Copsey. He was unable to put a time on the charts unless he's able to get around the track in the next 2 minutes here, which is a bit of a tall order considering he's not got the running start that he would have needed to be putting in competitive times. He will be scraping this one to its final second if he hopes to put another time on the track here. This is all against the clock before he's even started a proper qualifying run. It does leave him, and this is not the first time we've seen it, with very bizarre circumstances to play against. Such is the case of any visit to the Nürburgring Nordschleife. Fortunately, we're booked in for 3. With next weekend, we'll be coming back to this track before the then delayed 6 hours of Silverstone on the same day next Saturday for our run of things here for the final round of the Karussell Cup over on the mighty GT3s. Do look forward to that one indeed. Still plenty of drivers then still to see the line among them. Mr. Scallops in the 394. Now, there were very high expectations here, especially trailing on what was a very solid free practice session with what looks to be 1 more minute left to go. He'll still have enough time to start another flying lap. The question therein remains is, does he have the mettle here to go toe-to-toe with McLaren and that of Tom Breuer in the 159? Well, we're about to see is down towards the line comes Mr. Scallops. Let's see what Mercedes can do here. The 159 versus the 394, and across the line he's only 4th fastest, so it's a Mercedes 234 with Mr. Scallops at the back. But let's bear in mind he's got 1 more lap to play with as he's just crossed the line before the cutoff point. We'll be seeing him a little later on if he's able to keep on with this lap. We'll catch on board now down the Dottinger with Thomas Ferre of Alpine. Not far from him is the number 91. That's Manuel Lamoth in the number 91 Porsche. The 41 not far from them either, that being Anthony Valorio on his way through Galgenkopf. Let's stay on board though. With the 84 and the Alpine, bear in mind it is in the land of giants here. Often engines north of 4 litres it's playing against. And the titular Alpine only has 1.8 litres to play with. It's the one of the only, if not the only car in GT4 to be beneath that 2 litre bracket. The next smallest engine after it is the 2 litre EA 183 or EA 185 engine. It's an Audi motor that we find in the KTM Crossbow. Well, to the line comes Thomas Ferre from 7th place, and he's up to 6th and ahead of Pascal Stolz by a factor there of looking at it. The ballpark of 100 and... I want to say 184 thousandths, I want to say, in that range there, but still very, very close stuff right at the end of quali. The 91 across the line a moment ago. Manuel Lamoth in 9th place ahead of Anthony Valorio. We'll see what the rebuttal is, though, from the American in the 41 to the line from 10th place up to 8th and ahead of his fellow American driver, Steven Sutton, in the number 7 McLaren. Next to the line, the 22, Heinz Harzer with Aston Martin down the Dottinger Hohe at the moment, being trailed not far from his position at the moment by the 172 of Pascal Stolz, last round's pole sitter. And then trailing him is the 284 by looking at it here on our charts, that's Joop Overbeek, the Dutchman with the Porsche team. One of 5 Porsches in this round of the championship. They have been the de facto most popular manufacturer for round 2 of the championship. It's not hard to see where the popularity for the 718 Cayman comes from. We saw it used to great effect by that of Matthew Copsey over the GT4 Challenge. Sadly, for the 97, it's just not been his day here at the Nürburgring. Not enough time to make amends with his mistakes. Hart to the line, 12th at the end of qualifying. We'll be following them with the 172 in a moment's time on board with Pascal Stolz in the background there. That's Overbeek in the 284. 7th and 11th here, looking to make moves up the order. Can he get the leg back up over Thomas Ferre's Alpine? We saw it was not a far cry between the 6th place car and the 7th place car across the line. Then Pascal Stolz, and he leapfrogs over Ferre and Mason to put himself to 5th place for Maserati. We also saw an improvement there for Joop Overbeek, 284, now to 8th, and ahead of Anthony Valorio at the end of qualifying. The 55 to the line, here comes Asahi Ota. Can he find his way to the front of that second row? Sadly, not this time around. He'll be starting still on the second row, so there is a silver lining to this dark cloud that has been qualifying for Aston Martin. He finds himself 4th at the end of qualifying today. The number 12 next to the line, we'll see here, Tom Wells, on what looks to be a one-and-done qualifying endeavour. The former Ginetta driver now to join Maserati. Let's see, does he put a time on the charts across the line? It's 13th for Wells. The 813 coming to the line, Luca Tamburini with Porsche. He's 11th for the end of qualifying. Nearest to the line then, just exiting Galgenkopf onto the dotting, and the number 28 of Rafael Bayer. I must say, one of the biggest takeaways of today's qualifying session has been that of Tom Breuer. The NRW performance talent, we've seen him over on the Console Endurance Series many a time, but it was a very last-second entry for the Karussell Cup, so much so that we sadly don't even have a graphic for the 159, and really we should consider ourselves quite unlucky, because on the form he's on, he's looking to potentially gun for the race lead and race win today. Well, to the line comes Rafael Bayer, and he's fifth, not 5th, so he's 6th fastest there. Very close to 5th, though, and even closer to 7th. Rafael Bayer, though, bringing about good amends here to Audi at the end of qualifying. You see, what looks to be reconnecting to the session for just a moment there was Fabian Hodek. Aragonese's... oh, no, Aragonese's has had a disconnect there. He's had to reconnect to the session. There's the 104. So it wasn't Hodek that disconnected. It was Aragonese's. And Scallops there, 4th place. So nearest to the line at this time, the 413 of James Mason on his way towards Galgenkopf, just having exited the Kleiner Carousel. Also out on track, the 34 at this time. That's Václav Pospisil. And the 97, of course, of Matthew Copsey. So a lot of drivers still gunning to put a time on the charts here, but time is growing fickle for them. Sadly, with no news to discuss as of right now. We might have some news later on in tonight's forthcoming broadcast of round 5 of the XCL Pro Series, whilst we've got the opportunity to gather some more data for news. Sadly, we haven't got anything to report outside of, obviously, the announcements have come out of Toyota and their sister company Lexus of the GR-GT and their endeavours to pursue GT3. That was revealed to the public not long ago. Sadly, we don't have images for that as of right now. And Hyundai has also revealed their lineup with the return of Danny Sordo, Esa-Pekka Lappi, and also the arrival of Hayden Paddon. Well, to the line comes the 413. What is it looking like for James Mason in the solo entry for BMW from 8th to 5th? There, a great resolve for the Brit right at the very end of qualifying. Puts himself up the road. You can see there, really not by a far distance. That is, by looking at it there, a factor of 0.007 of a second between himself and Asahi Ota to make that top 5. So a very, very solid end to qualifying for the 413. Redemption at last for James Mason. The 34 then, nearest the line. Václav Pospisil with the world's weight upon his shoulders to perform here. He's got to put Aston Martin into a top running position. He's looking hopeful in today's session in that 34, heading down the Dottinger. Question there and remains. Things still hanging very thinly in the balance inside of that. Looking at it there, really inside of that top 5. When you're talking in terms of metrics, actually talking even further out to 7th. You're talking metrics here at the Nürburgring. 5.8 seconds is really not too far away at all on a track like this. And it's always the big learning curve that we have to take, and also the drivers have to take, is sort of adjusting your frame of comparison to the sheer breadth of a track such as this. You could fit, if I'm not mistaken, the entirety of the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps inside of the free space there, on the inside of the Nordschleife. To the line then, Pospisil to 4th. A great result for him then, much like it has been for James Mason. Better late than never for Pospisil's resolve there. Aston Martin to 4th. Well, the only time we're waiting for now is Matthew Copsey. And he had a bit of a down-and-out start to qualifying, but you can see the 97 is firing on all cylinders on his run out of Flansgarten 2. Into the Schwalbenschwanz, you can see it is hell-bent on a time today. The 97 has wasted absolutely nothing over the course of this lap, and he has been moving like a thing possessed on his way now out of the Kleiner Karussell. It is looking very lively here for Matthew Copsey. His chances to put himself back up into a top 5 position for the start of today's race. Bear in mind, that was all he needed to fight for the race lead. Ultimately, that which he won in round 1. Now on the exit of Galgenkopf, could it be redemption for Copsey? This is the long walk to a potential top 5. The 97 gunning for it. Bear in mind, the nearest Porsche to a top 10 position is Jorp Overbeek. The Dutchman in the 284 is 11th fastest, and off from the nearest time set by Thomas Ferro by nearly 2.8 seconds there. About 2.7. Well, down out of Antoniusbucher, down towards Tiergarten. This is looking very, very spry here for Matthew Copsey. The question therein remains, considering how long he's committed to this lap, it's definitely not invalid, but as he makes his way down towards Tiergarten, where will he be positioned as he makes his way to the checkered line here at the end of qualifying? He has been hell-bent in that final sector. Can it finally be redemption here after a very long drawn-out qualifying for the 97? Down towards the line then comes Matthew Copsey. Where does he put himself? And across the line in 10th. He was hell-bent in that final sector, but Porsche, you can see, are really struggling. It has been dominant today from Tom Breuer and McLaren. Mercedes really not too far away either. And Aston Martin breaking that tied up in the top 5 for Mercedes. What would have been a 2.34 is now a 2.35 with Václav Pospisil, the number 34 Aston Martin, now into that 4th fastest spot. We'll get onto the full grid in a moment's time, but what an end to qualifying. A lot of theatrics there for our first run of GT4s here in the Karussell Cup. Now, looking back towards that calendar, of course, it's 75 minutes for today's race. The same regs as before, 1 mandatory pit stop for today's race. For the GT4s, it's 75 minutes, so 1 hour and 15. And then for the GT3s, it'll be 1 hour and a half. That comes up next Saturday, same time. And then I believe, actually looking quickly back onto this calendar, the day after, December 14th, after the GT3 round, we'll be coming back to you for HCCL's 2.4 hours at Spa for St. Jude's Children's Hospital. That's a charity race coming up at the same time, around 2 p.m. GMT for our British viewers, and around 9 a.m. EST for our American viewers, for a 2.4-hour charity race at Spa. So that'll be a very fun week coming up next week. We've also got quite a few events coming up not too far from now. Later on today, we're be coming back to you for the 5th round of the XCL Pro Series. That will sadly be our last time broadcasting with XCL for the foreseeable future. That's the 3 events we were scheduled to broadcast, and the rest of the season can be caught over by the folks on XCL TV. We'll have more to discuss with that a little later on. Of course, coming up tomorrow, we're back on for the NLRL Sunday League. After a bit of a delay, we return to the Nürburgring for round 6 of the championship, set to come up tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. GMT. Well, let's get on to the event at hand here, and what better timing than now to start talking about that formation grid for this race. We can see, though, oh my goodness, no, don't tell me, was that a disconnect there for Tom Breuer? Yes, it's looking a bit sparse on the front row, and you can see there, Fabian Hodek now finds himself into that leading position. That is gut-wrenching for Tom Breuer. That is the worst kind of timing I think we've ever seen for a disconnect. Right now, though, what it has given us is a very bizarre set of circumstances, because Tom Breuer, despite dominating and qualifying, now rejoins the session in 19th. Now lining up behind Miguel Silva in the number 31. The 159 is at the back of the field. What it has promoted is Fabian Hodek up to pole position in the 822 Mercedes, with Alberto Aragoneses now to second place. Václav Pospisil in third, with Mr. Scallops in fourth. James Mason readjusts to a top 5 start, having been given back that opportunity. He's joined on the third row by Asahi Yota in the 55. Pascal Stoltz in 7th. With the 172 Maserati. Rafael Bayer in 8th, with Matthew Copsey now further up into the top 10, now to 9th from 10th out of qualifying today. It puts Thomas Ferre back into the top 10 for Alpine. Joop Overbeek starts alongside Ferre there in 11th place, with Anthony Valorio in 12th. Stephen Sutton right alongside him on the grid there for 13th place. Luca Tamburini in 14th. Manuel Lamoff in 15th, with Heinz Harzer in 16th place. Tom Wells in 17th. Miguel Silva in 18th. And that shocker change of things there after that disconnect. Tom Breuer starts from the back. Well, that has definitely come as quite the shock to the system. We'll be getting on board then with our new leading 2, Fabian Hodek and Alberto Aragoneses. Mercedes now given inadvertently a 1-2 start to round 2 of the Karussell Cup. This has definitely been quite a broad change here. We'll be getting on to the run of our formation lap in a moment's time. Now on our new pole sitting position, after a very shock decision there, is Fabian Hodek. Alberto Aragoneses is now going to have to readjust himself to what his expectations are for this race, where he was expecting to at least fight further up through the podium. He's now going to have to start recalibrating. How exactly do I start fighting for the race lead here? How do I get the earliest possible advantage over Hodek? You can see it's rolling very slow here down towards Tiergarten. It's become a very bizarre set of circumstances for him here. Not that I'm sure he'll be arguing too much with the way things have been laid out for him. It now gives Mercedes, looking at it here, 3 of those top 5 positions. So this has definitely been one of the more bizarre changes right at the very last second before race time. Down towards that start-finish line then. This is going to be an interesting one. The dawn of the GT4s then here in the HCCL Karussell Cup, and heading down towards the line, leading from the front here, 2 Mercedes, the 822 of Hodek and the 104 of Aragoneses for round 2 of the HCCL GT4, not GT4 Challenge, the Karussell Cup. We're away with the GT4s, and right off to the start there, the 91 picks up a drive-through penalty for starting infringement. And right off the bat, we can see here the 104 already up the inside on Hodek, but following all the way through, looks to be up the inside there. Was that James Mason? It is! Out through the Yokohama S's, Mason leads in the Nürburgring amidst a collision between the leading Mercs right down towards turn 1. Get a look at this for the race start as Asahi Ota now swamps his way in towards the line of sight of Fabian Hodek. What on earth happened there? Mason just tied the headband around his head, went full kamikaze down towards turn 1, and he takes the lead right off the bat. This is truly bizarre stuff then, folks. I do not quite understand what it is I am seeing here. Mr. Scallops now looks to try his luck over that of Rafael Bayer, who I must say has been on the warpath from the race start. That Audi has not wasted any time here. One driver who is really not too happy at all. You can see there tucked up behind that of Ferre and Copsey is Alberto Aragoneses. He started from that front row, was knocked asunder in towards Yokohama, now finds himself tucked up behind and makes a little bit of contact there with the 97, who himself is pressed up against another rear-engined machine there, the 84 Alpine of Thomas Ferry. They make their way down towards Bitten Warsteiner. Almost got looped over with the title of the race. Here we are in the Karussell Cup, but we're here with the GT4s, and it's a little too nostalgic for me having come out of that GT4 challenge season. It really does bring back some warm memories here with a lot of new faces. As we make our way down towards Vidal, we could be seeing some side-by-side action here. Copsey versus Ferre, Porsche versus Alpine in towards Vidal. Somehow the Alpine stays around the outside. My goodness, last of the late breakers there. That does invite in Alberto Aragoneses to come and have a go. As we look here, out back is what looks to be an emerging fight further down the field. But let's just get a quick update here from the front row. Hodeg now drops in behind Bayer. Ota in pursuit of Mason. As we see here, Rafael Bayer versus Fabian Hodek. This is the fight for third place at the moment, making our way through the Hatzenbach section. Not far then from Hoheneichen. You can see that all of them really have not been able to keep the same kind of mantle as that 413. James Mason has really said sod it and has gone right up into the lead and vanished with it. Before Flugplatz, we are now looking much closer at a fight between Ota, Bayer and Hodek before any of them get a chance to have a pop here at the 413 of Mason. Oh, heading out through Cottonborn in towards Schwedenkreuz. Mercedes versus Audi, making their way to Schwedenkreuz here, looking around the outside. But you can see it's a little bit of a bumpy run for this one. You can see a little bit of desync going on between Bayer and Hodek. They make their way out through Arenberg in towards Poststrasse. And you can start to see the gap start to open up now between the 55 and the 413. They're separating away from the pack. Asahi Ota has very much entered pursuit mode here. He's after that 413. He's out for blood, heading down to the Adenauer Force. We're watching, though, here with the fight third place. Hodek v Bayer down to Adenauer. Meanwhile, in the background, I just want to draw your attention to the fight going on for currently fifth place, Mr. Scallops versus Václav Pospisil, as Pascal Stoltz starts to drop distance away in the 172 Maserati. Also, to draw your attention as well, that Alpine is now under siege from the 104. Alberto Aragoneses looks to fight with Thomas Ferre. This could get quite interesting here. You can see this is the fight going on at the moment. The 91, which is Manuel Lamoff, is still yet to serve that drive-through penalty. He's most recently just been passed there by his fellow Porsche Matthew Copsey on his way down towards, looking at it here, the run in towards Kallenhard, just out of Metzgerfeld. You can see that with Copsey. It looks like damage there on the rear bumper. So there definitely could be a wider explanation as to what's gone on there, as he now finds himself outside of that top 10 in its entirety, where he was fighting previously with Ferre and with Aragoneses. Oh, into the wall. That is Miguel Silva. So the yellow flag's out for the 31. Trouble down at Metzgerfeld on his way down towards Kallenhard. That's the 31 in serious trouble there. And Miguel Silva returns to the pit lane, so that could be our first DNF of round 2 of the championship. So back in the green flag conditions, that has all gone horrifically wrong for him there. So you see here, this is Tom Breuer, the man who started previously from pole position, but then disconnected on the formation grid and was moved to the back of this 19-car, soon to be 18-car grid, has already carved up more than 50% of the field in his pursuit of a solid result today. He is on the hunt for revenge, and he is going to have it. like it or not. The 159 currently next in his sights right now. Aragonesis, Ferre and Stoltz, Maserati, Alpine and Mercedes set to become victims here of the approaching McLaren. Well, let's get a look up front here because Asahi Ota has dropped a bit of time away from Mason. Now finds himself stuck with the considerations right now of a defensive fight for second place. As we stay here with the 55, he is now having a fight for second place off of Rafael Bayer. Well, I must say, he's really got a wriggle on with that Audi. Now on his way down towards Stahlstrecke, on his way to Karussell. This is looking very, very dicey here between the 55 and the 28. Meanwhile, James Mason has kept it absolutely ice cold since his overtake, leveraging that side-by-side scuffle between Hodek and Aragonesis. He was able to just sweep on by, took the inside line as if he was going to the arena section, and then ultimately just had both of them for breakfast there, right into the race lead. That was almost effortless. He made that one look unfathomably easy. Up through Hoa Acht, you can see that Mason's just going to have to tuck in for a nice rhythm here. He knows that Asahi Ota is being given ample pressure by Rafael Bayer. Now, the worst state of it is that this pressure can force Asahi Ota to overextend and make him just a little bit faster here. It improves the gap between himself and Mason. Best case scenario for Mason right now is these two get side by side and get into some kind of scuffle. That gives a lot of breathing space for him, and it continues his control of the race lead. Heading out of Eschbach in towards Brünchen. Ota really has his hands full here. We're going to get away from his perspective just quickly to try and catch on board with that Audi, who was very briefly there, just before we cut away to try and find his point of view of things, was actually looking to put his nose up the inside, dare I say it there. Well, I have to catch up with these two in a moment's time because I do want to get a look out back here because we are starting to see things ramp up massively around the grid. It's contact between Harzer and Tamburini, and he collects Villorio out through Brünchen. That looked diabolical between those three. Attempting to look for a very solid fight going on here. We're back right now with what looks to be the fight of, I want to say this is, yes, 5th place at the moment. Pospisil versus Hodek. That huge incident that we've just seen on our screens there was between 3 different cars down at Brünchen. Quite a sizable one indeed. We are seeing a very, very close fight going on here. This is all for 5th place on track. We follow on board at the moment with Pospisil. He's having to defend from 3 other cars on his tail, and this is definitely a bit of a worrying factor for him, is when you look at the stability of those cars behind him, there's a lot of desync going on there for 5th place. Meanwhile, up the order, we can see that Mr. Scallops is drawing in the gap right now on Rafael Bayer, who is in turn drawing in the gap on Asahi Ota. This may be one that we have to go onto the wider screens to be able to view adequately here. Getting on board now with Rafael Bayer, you can see the gap between himself and Asahi Ota. Getting back behind, you can see the gap between Hodek and Pospisil, the gap between Stoltz and Aragonesis. Aragonesis now actually getting up and around Stoltz. That Maserati struggling in the straight line here up against the AMG as we make our way out of Antoniusbucher. Meanwhile, Thomas Ferre not actually too far behind at all. But having been taken for position there by Tom Breuer, you can see he's just rocketing down through Tiergarten. Very, very late on the brakes from there. So for Pospisil, he's found himself a little bit of safe haven here from the battling going on behind him. Hodek now really has his hands full with Aragonesis. This is definitely going to be one to watch here. Let's get on board. Fabian Hodek versus Alberto Aragonesis down towards turn 1. They get to do this one all over again after just a single lap. And now getting the leg up is Alberto Aragonesis to 6th place. That is revenge in my mind there. The 104 finally getting the leg up over the 822. It's come at a cost there, both of them being in the top 5 after their starting incident. And there you have it. You see quite a few cars are looking to be, as it stands, running into the pit lane. Among them, Matthew Copsey. You also see Manuel Lamoff. Heinz Harzer stays out, though. There, Lamoff serving his drive-through penalty as we speak. Looking back on board now, this is with Václav Pospisil's point of view again, but this is less so for the fight of 5th now. As you can see, he's been able to get a bit of a wriggle on in the last half of a lap. Now finds himself eyeing up his chances to fight for 4th place over Mr. Scallops in the 394. Rafael Bayer and Asahi Ota entering a world of their own on the GP Strecker as we make our way out through Bitten Warsteiner. You can see the last of those podium positions just not too distant at all from our 2 on screen, making our way in through Hatzenbecksborgen. You see though, Aragoneses looks to be clawing his way up the inside, so it's less a fight for 4th, more fight for 5th here. Alberto Aragoneses already got 1 position in this lap. Can he get 2? Absolutely. Aragoneses, a man on a mission then. That 104 is out for blood. Already having got the leg up on Fabian Hodek, now gets the leg up on Václav Pospisil, who has to start considering his chances here to defend for 6th place, because as you can see right behind him there is the 822 of Hodek. A lot to consider for that Aston Martin. It has been quite an up and down sort of race here, and we've not even been 15 minutes into our performance today. Looking around though, something to give ample thought toward is the gap between Ota and Mason. This has started to come down quite dramatically over the course of the last couple of corners, and it could come to a head here, heading out of Hatzenbeck, heading towards the Hoheneichen and the Kittelbacher Hohe as we head up towards Flugplatz. The Aston Martin actually does seem to have the run here over the BMW. Let's stay on board with Asahi Ota, as this could definitely get quite interesting for the 2 heading up through Flugplatz. A little bit of aero wash has definitely sent him out a few extra inches there over to the left. That's the same story for the Audi riding in the wake of the Aston Martin as we make our way up through Cottonborn. Heading down towards Schwedenkreuz, this is where it could get dicey for them here. As you can see, the BMW just opens up the gap so vastly in the straightaways. That S55 as the M177 absolutely beat. We also just see in the background the 22, that's Heinz Harzer going slow in towards the Hoheneichen section. In towards Adenauer, we're still watching with these 2. So that gap's starting to stabilize between Asahi Ota and James Mason. There were a few slip-ups earlier in the lap to have given him that fighting chance, really, to try and get out from the shadow of the 413 BMW, but the 55 is going to have to wait a little while longer. Looking further down towards the back of the top 10 from where we were just a moment ago on the podium, we're looking towards the back here as Tom Breuer's now up the road from Thomas Ferre. Pascal Stolz in front of Breuer, though, could be a free position if that Alpine stays close. We're here with Ferre making our way out through towards Kallenhardt into that forest section. Matter of fact, let's see if we can catch on board here with Pascal Stolz having to defend position right now off of a vastly approaching 159. All currently in contention for 8th place. His chances to fight with Mr. Scallops are starting to drop by the wayside here as he's having to consider the McLaren-shaped problem in his rearview mirror. Out through the Asphalt Breitscheid. I really do think this is some of the magic that comes to the table when GT4 is in town. In what other race are you going to be able to see a Maserati Gran Turismo fight with a McLaren 570S and an Alpine A110? A Monaco Cruiser versus a track toy from Woking, Surrey. All of them going toe-to-toe with a former rallying icon. So it is a very bizarre one. Out through Kesselchen, you can see just how much straight line speed the McLaren's got. He's an omnipresent sight over that rear view of the Maserati. The problem is its tremendous size is actually working to its benefit here. That McLaren can't find a way around the Maserati. Heading out through Mutzkurve in towards Klostertal. Bear in mind, that little Alpine has just been able to sit comfortably in the slipstream generated by that McLaren and just ride along here to see what goes on in the fight up for 8th place with Pascal Stolz. As we just cross over that quarter of an hour mark, let's get a look at where things stand as we head down towards the Karussell. James Mason leads here in round 2, and the GT4 division runs We are finding ourselves with the 4:13 atop the charts at the moment. We see running out very wide there. That was Pascal Stoltz. That just invites in that of Tom Breuer to come and have a go here. And 8th place is now lost for Stoltz. He has to start considering, how do I defend for 9th, or how do I attack for 8th? Really, what are the considerations with Thomas Ferré hounding him in that little Alpine? It's David and Goliath, as it were, heading up through Hohe. As we saw just then, down to 9th place goes Pascal Stoltz. James Mason still leads. Asahi Ota second. Rafael Bayer up to third. Alberto Aragonese's on the warpath to return to the podium. He's in 4th now after his starting incident with Fabian Hodek. Václav Pospisil still in the top 5 for Aston Martin. Currently in 5th place and ahead of Hodek. Scallops in 7th. Stoltz down to 9th as Tom Breuer most recently moved up to 8th place. Thomas Ferré in 10th. Tom Wells in 11th. Jorp Overbeek in 12th with Stephen Sutton in 13th. Luca Tamburini in 14th. Anthony Valorio 15th. Heinz Harzer in 16th. Manuel Amoff in 17th. And Matthew Copsey in 18th place. Very early for the pit lane run, but I think this is definitely going to play into Copsey's hands here. He's got a lot of clean open road, not a lot of worries on his mind, as now he can just chip away at the rest of the grid for the next 58.5 minutes of racing. Out through Sprunghögel. Stoltz breaking clear of the Alpine of Thomas Ferré. Now a second between himself and the 84. We'll catch on later on. We just saw a little bit of airtime there for Tom Wells and the number 12. Very used to seeing him with Ginetta, so the call to go to Maserati, really, I do not know where that came from. These are two broadly different takes of the same medium here. The Maserati is very rough around the edges when compared to the Ginetta. It's a much heftier motor compared to the Ginetta as well. It's the antithesis of the G55 in its purest form, and yet here he is, not actually doing terribly today. Bear in mind, it's a bit of a up and down qualifying for Wells. He does find himself sort of chipping towards that top 10 at the moment. His nearest target is going to be another Maserati. Pascal Stoltz is now down to 10th place, who I must pick up on this. In the last couple of corners, actually lost out position to Thomas Ferré. So that is quite the shocker there. The Alpine thwarts the Maserati for position. You can see the size difference. That plucky little Alpine. I mean, it was originally created for rally racing. It won the first ever World Rally Championship back in 1972. It was an absolute devil in its day. And this modern day example was produced, if I'm not mistaken, in 2017. Getting a look at the data specs for it. Just having a look through some of our notes here for the Alpine. I'm just trying to get a scope here for the Alpine. We do know that it has that little 1.8 litre motor. And that, I believe, is from a Renault Megane RS250. Not a bad hot hatch in any mind. Not at all. It's a pretty solid car, all things considered. So yeah, here we have a little bit of data for that little Alpine. Of course, introduced in 2017, reintroduced, I should say, in 2017, as the Renault Group's answer to the rising demand for small, lightweight sports cars, following trends set in stone from Porsche, Audi, Fiat Abarth, and BMW. The A110's crowning achievements included a 1-2-3 finish at both the 1971 and 1973 Monte Carlo Rally. So it wasn't 1972, it was a champion in, and as we see, actually, just on that brief rant about Alpine, I take a look back there, and that was a major incident down in the GP Strecker. Now, I believe, looking at it there, that is for Václav Pospisil with Aston Martin, the 34, off track there, down at the, I believe that's a Dunlop curve, and also caught up there is Rafael Bayer. So we'll have to pick up on the talks of the titular Alpine a little later on here, as Thomas Ferré has now found a significant boost in where he stands in this race so far. Alberto Aragonese is now into an executive command of 3rd place. Asahi Ota now locked in on a fight with James Mason for the race lead. Rafael Bayer now drops all the way back behind Thomas Ferré. You see these two out through Vidal. leaving absolutely nothing up to chance here. Bayer looking for the long way around for a late apex on the 84 before we get down towards the start of Hatzenbeck. He may have his chances here, but cut off by the Alpine. In towards Hatzenbeck we go. The 84 is holding his nerve rather nicely, leveraging some of the benefits that come with that rear-engined rear-drive platform. Much like the Porsches, it's got impressive stopping power. So up against the Audi, he can outbrake the Audi at every single corner on this track. Moreover, he's lighter. And by some way as well. Taking a look back to the BOP just quickly, Alpine and Audi both working with significant weight reductions, but when you consider curb weight, the Alpine's lighter by default. So in towards Hoheneichen, and you can see up the order as well. That's Mr. Scallops. And by looking at it there, if I'm not mistaken, that is Alberto Aragoneses. But we may have to get on board with this fight of the race lead. So we just cut away here from Thomas Ferre at the back of our top 5 to get up towards what is going on the front row here. James Mason in the defense of the race lead out through Schwedenkreuz for BMW, with Aston Martin and now Mercedes on their tail as well. He's got a two-pronged defensive here. And that S55 has really got to perform up against AMG's finest. That's the M177 and the M178 V8 engines going toe-to-toe with the BMW S55 inline 6. It's 6 cylinders against 8. That's 22 cylinders on all of those podium positions there put together. It's a lot of engine power. Out through Adenauer, you can see that things are actually starting to close up between Ota and Aragoneses when you consider relative gaps here. It's only 4/10 over an 8/10 gap between Mason and Ota, so there could be a little bit of infighting here on the podium. Looking further around the field, just to quickly get an update from some of the other fights, namely that top 5 fight we saw from a while back. We can also see a fight going on here, Stoltz v Pospisil, with Bayer v Ferre soon to be another consideration here. Ferre now drops behind Bayer, and Scallops for that matter as well. Stoltz, though, having dropped away from him down to 8th place. See here for Wells, closely followed by Sutton. Hodek back to the top 5. We now look here on with Alberto Aragoneses, the former Alpine driver in the GT4 Challenge, now finds himself in the confines of Mercedes AMG, going toe-to-toe with the same engine under the bonnet of a different breed of car there. The Aston Martin V8 Vantage of Asahi Ota was a serious championship mainstay in the GT4 Challenge, went toe-to-toe with Labey and Mizin in a very hectic fight for the championship lead. The number 28 is in trouble, so we'll have to cut away in a moment's time here from what's going on with Alberto Aragoneses just to quickly inspect who is the said car in trouble. The number 28 is Raphael Bayer. Out through the Asphalt side is in serious disrepair there. Has gotten back going, but is now behind Tom Wells in Maserati, so he's just outside of that top 10. Back on board with Aragoneses, though. We're into that fight right now of second place between Ota and Aragoneses, the 55 Aston Martin versus the 104 Mercedes. And bear in mind, we've only been looking at it here nearly 25 minutes into this race of a 75-minute race. We have not really covered too long a distance here. All of this is working wonderfully for James Mason, because Asahi Ota having to reallocate his efforts here to defend second place off of the approaching Alberto Aragoneses has forced him off of the sights set on that race lead. It has caused this drop away in time whilst he starts trying to defend more and more. You can see these deviations in line to hold up that 104, to try and sway any efforts to get him away from his back and away from his line of sight. Has been slowly allowing that BMW to just cruise away with the race lead here. Nearly 1.5 seconds before we got out of Stahlstrecke. You see here with Aragoneses, he's practically pushing Asahi Ota in towards Hohe This is diabolical between Mercedes and Aston Martin. The two sister cars, as it were, the V8 Vantage and the AMG GT, sharing the same beating heart there, engineered by AMG. Heading in towards Hedvigshohe. And into Wippermann. In through Eschbach, in towards Brünchen. V8 versus V8, and you can see all of this pushing and shoving has allowed a certain someone to start creeping back into play here. 3 seconds away. My eyes do not deceive me. As lurking in the shadows for the entirety of this race after a very unfortunate result on the grid, that is Tom Breuer. Lurking just off in the distance there. The Phantom of the Nürburgring in pursuit. The number 7 now in trouble. Yellow flags out through Wippermann, and that is for, by looking at it there, that's Stephen Sutton in trouble with McLaren. We stay on board though with our Genesis Villota because it looks to come to a head here as we head in towards the Schwalbenschwanz and then out towards the Kleine Karussell, where it could really get arms out here between these two, is heading down towards the Dottinger Hohe. And as you can see then, we may not even have to wait that long. There's a little bit of a run out for Asahi Ota, and the exit of the Kleine Karussell does leave Alberto Aragoneses with some room around the outside to potentially swing back on him through Galgenkopf. Regardless, it's trimmed away enough momentum here to keep the Mercedes in Slipstream City. Heading out of Galgenkopf, you can see quite immediate aversions there to try and force him out of his line of Slipstream. It's all for naught though, because Alberto Aragoneses has already hitched on to the Aston Martin. He's held on for dear life, and now he's going to ride the wave all the way down Dottinger and in towards Antoniusbucher, where he could look at making a move here over the Aston Martin. You can see though, it's AMG engine versus AMG engine, and they are finding themselves very, very closely pitched, and dare I say it, the Aston is gaining speed. So somehow, in and amidst it all, this has got to be a bit of an embarrassment for AMG. Their licensed built engine is faster than their own. Heading down towards Tiergarten, you can see all of this has played wonderfully into the hands of an approaching Tom Breuer, because now the fight has not just become for second place for Alberto Aragoneses, it has become a defensive consideration for third. Tom Breuer, I mean, he is just clawing in time. He's 5 seconds faster than the leading pair. It's a thought so staggering, it is making me physically sick. Heading towards Yokohama, Asahi Ota runs very deep through turn 1, then out through turn 2, barely holds to the inside, but loses position out to Alberto Aragoneses. All of this forces Asahi Ota now onto the iron sights of Tom Breuer. The two separated by only 0.2 of a second. We catch on board here with Tom Breuer in his pursuit of Asahi Ota. This is where we find the 159. He started 19th on this grid after qualifying for pole. That disconnect forced him to the back of the field, and he has made 15 positions in the span of 3 laps. Less than half of the racing distance, and he's already within chances of a podium. Now we discuss what's been under the bonnet of the Mercedes, the Aston and the Alpine, but let's talk McLaren very quickly as we stay on board here with Tom Breuer in his 3-way fight between Ota and Aragoneses, all for second place, mind you, on the exit of Arsteiner. The McLaren 570S was introduced in 2016, developed in-house by McLaren's motorsporting division. It features a 3.8-litre M838TE twin-turbo V8, making 413 horsepower. It's the same one you'll find in the road-going 570S, but unlike the road car, it's been down-tuned from 562 horsepower from the factory. All compliant with SRO GT4 regulations. It was later succeeded by the McLaren Artura in GT4. It was always the sort of baby brother of the McLaren lineup, the smaller sibling to the 720S and the successor of the 650S, and the late descendant of the MP4-12C. In my honest opinion, probably one of the best McLarens going. It is ruthlessly efficient, though. Like most McLarens, it has been made with that collaborative form and function principle. Everything you see on these McLarens is doing something, and what it is creating is an absolute track weapon. As my eyes do not deceive me, do not scratch your eyes and do not touch that X button. Don't go anywhere. It is 4 cars for the race lead here in the Nürburgring. We didn't even get this in the late stages of the M2 race, yet we get it now for GT4. However, you need the showcase for why GT4 is such a magical category in Assetto Corsa Competizione. Look no further. BMW, Mercedes, Aston Martin and McLaren all fighting for the race lead. Meanwhile, out back, we can see a fight going on here. Alpine versus Aston Martin. Thomas Ferry now up to 6th place with Václav Pospisil looking to take 6th off of him. They head through Schwedenkreuz, heading down towards Arenberg and Polstrasse. What can Ferry do? He's later on the brakes there. And much like the Porsches over in GT3, it is remarkable, almost unparalleled stopping power from that A110. Looking back up here with Breuer, Ota, Aragoneses and Mason. I mean, this has got to be really quite the world's weight for James Mason. Looking out back here, Tom Wells versus Jorp Overbeek. Porsche versus Maserati. The Porsche looking up the inside. Overbeek with an absolute lunges onto the gravel, though. Sadly for the 284, he tucks back in behind with his tail between his legs there in 11th place. A very lofty send, and had it stuck, would have been one of the best moves of the race by a long shot. Let's get a look, though, with the leading car here. James Mason has got to really be feeling the heat of it now, but don't back out of the kitchen in that 413. He still leads this race. We could start to see a bit of a schism forming here between the 4 cars of this race leading fight, with Aragoneses now picking up the slack for the fight of 1st place. Asahi Ota drawing in a bit of a gap now between the leading 2 and the trailing 2 in our top 4 fight, as now he looks to defend away from Tom Breuer. He found that his defense against Aragoneses ultimately cost him more harm than good. So now he's definitely going to be redoubling his efforts to defend this time around, as he wasn't trying to juggle priorities. We see, though, looking to potentially get side-by-side. Aragoneses versus Mason will stay on board with the leading BMW. He's led so far in this race after a blindsiding turn 1 move. Went high and dry through turn 1 and let Aragoneses as the 822 of Hodek run themselves asunder down through the Yokohamas. He swept up the rewards right off the bat, but now Aragoneses is looking for revenge. That's my position, he says, as we make our way down towards, not Kallenhardt, sorry, we're heading down towards Kesselchen and Mutzkurve. Heading towards Mutzkurve, you can see it is very, very close-knit there in that top 4, but as you can start to see is almost 2 fights happening in tandem, let alone an overarching fight for 1st. Aragoneses, though, is not letting go of his chances here to usurp command off of James Mason. Down towards Stahlstrecker we go. Meanwhile, out back, Asahi Ota still holding on to 3rd, but a bit of a bump over the curb there for James Mason. And what it does is create a ripple effect that allows Asahi Ota potentially to 2nd here. He'll be to the outside, running into the Karussell, and he takes 2nd, back off of Aragoneses. One slight ripple here creates this own butterfly effect that has given Asahi Ota his fighting chance for 2nd. Let's get a look out back, though, for Asahi Ota's point of view of things, as we see here with the 55 Aston Martin. Now back up to 2nd, but with both Aragoneses and Breuer, it is both barrels of absolute slaughter awaiting him here as he makes his way up through Hoart. This is unbelievable stuff here in the Karussell Cup. Absolutely airtight between these 4. With Aragoneses not giving up at all here, making our way down towards Eschbach and in towards Brunchen. You can see that Mercedes is all over him there like a bad habit. Meanwhile, the 570S just taking a bit of a back seat here, letting these 2 beef things out, run themselves out of road, run themselves too high of temperature, and then just sweep up, take the rewards here. Playing very tactically. Tom Breuer still knows there's 40 minutes of racing left to play for. There's no need to get greedy. Heading up through Flansgart 9s in towards Flansgarten 5 coming up in a moment's time. But first comes the Sprunghorgel. The BMW gets a little bit of airtime. Really the only one to get up off of all 4 wheels there. Looked to be the McLaren out back there, the 159 of Tom Breuer. Getting a bit of airtime in that 570S. What was previously, I think I said it was 24 cylinders in that podium. You're now looking at much more when you bring that top four in, no question here. More on that analogy later on, though, because Asahi Ota, with another bit of a upset run through Kleiner Karussell, is just chipping more and more time away, and he is creating this wind tunnel for the rest of the cars behind him in terms of that slipstream, because he's created what is effectively an expressway lane as he tries to tuck into the slipstream of the leading BMW. He's going to be finding himself in a very uncomfortable spot where he knows he has overarching straight line speed off of the Mercedes. Does he think that he holds that same merit over McLaren, who is not too far away at all, and as a matter of fact is gaining on the pair? You can see it holds in en passant here between the 55 and the 104. It has got to be gut-wrenching stuff here for Alberto Aragonese, because he is powerless against the advance of Tom Breuer. It's one position already for the 159. The German looking for two as he makes his way up to the back end of Asahi Ota, down towards Tiergarten. Can't find the second one, but Tom Breuer now up to third in the fight for the race lead. Bear in mind, we are still just north, I think, of the halfway mark of this race, but diving to the pit lane, not looking to take the risk here. Asahi Ota is in with Aston Martin. Meanwhile, looking out back, we can see this is Thomas Ferre. We've caught on with a few times here. The Frenchman in the 84, the only Alpine in this race, finds himself currently 7th place. That's soon to be upgraded to 6th, but as you can see there, heading to the pit lane goes the 84. Following in his wake, that's Václav Pospisil in the number 34 Aston. One move I'm surprised to see, at least in all of this, was that James Mason did not opt to go into the pit lane. We saw that the BMW over the course of that lap was struggling for lateral grip, and we saw it especially down between, looking at it there, out through Karussell and then out towards the Schwabenschwanz is where he was really struggling to find any kind of grip on that 413. So it does perplex me that he has not opted for that run of the pits. Meanwhile, out back, Tom Breuer, not actually too far away at all from Alberto Aragonese, so he's definitely found the height of his performances in the last 10 or so minutes. And now, as he faces down the chances to lead this race after starting from the back, I mean, it is a legendary sight we are talking here from that 159. Bear in mind, on his first race in the Karussell Cup, as he didn't show up last week and only just signed up in the last sort of half hour before today's race. Fortunately, we know enough about Tom Breuer to know what he's capable of, and right now, with James Mason having another upset, this time through Vidal chicane, the NRW performance driver, Tom Breuer, does have a sizable chance here to lead the race. But he can't tunnel himself in on the driver in front. He still has to consider the very real threat out back that is Alberto Aragonese. He is no slouch. He was not far off of Breuer's pace in qualifying. Moreover, had it been the case that all three of them started at the front of the pack, there'd be no doubts that the 104 could still leverage a challenge for that race lead over the 159. The chances would have been slim, given that Breuer's performance seemingly is unparalleled on levels we've yet to see in any competition at the Nürburgring to this day. Another big upset there for James Mason. It's a perilous sight here for the 413, a very injured BMW for those tyre lives, up against the McLaren with seemingly much more to give. Mason pushing it absolutely to the upper limit here. It does leave a bit of a pit in our stomach, wondering what's going to happen for the 413. As you can see, every time he tackles the curves, it is one twitch away from oblivion for that BMW. He's holding on to dear life as he heads out through Cottonbourne. Meanwhile, in the background, just to bring your attention to this, let's get on board very quickly here. This is Tom Breuer versus Alberto Aragonese. So Aragonese's actually had a chance there for around the outside. Now through Schwedenkreuz, tucks back in down towards Auenberg and Polstrasse on the McLaren of Tom Breuer. This is all in for second place at the moment as they make their way to Fuchsrohr and the Adenauer Forst. Aragonese, let's not count him out of this fight at all. He still has a very, very good chance here to gain position. We see Asahi Ota emerges from the pit lane in 7th place there, ahead of Pospisil and Ferre, with Bayer now at the back of that top 10. He has created quite a sizable divide on this grid right now. We'll get on board with Alberto Aragonese in the 104. And as we mentioned a few times already, this has definitely been a gamble worth taking, given the popularity Mercedes has on this grid.
Looking back to that balance of performance statistic once again, you can see that they've not really been beset by any major difficulties. It's negligible changes for them compared to, say, for example, Audi, Alpine, Aston Martin, BMW, or Ginetta for that matter. But really, it's a perfect formula we've seen in the hands of several drivers over the course of several different championships. I mean, to name one such example of an exceptional talent behind the wheel of that AMG, at least here on the High Caliber Community League, look back to the GT4 Challenge and that of Vladislav Mizin, a serious championship contender in the #1 AMG. And now we get to see the same inklings of that performance emerge out of Alberto Aragonese, who last time we saw him, of course, was with Alpine. So a big change has yielded big results so far for Aragonese. He's still fighting on that podium, and he was beset by his own set of challenges, much like Tom Breuer, who's now up the road from him, as we make our way out through the Ausfahrtweitscheid. He's still clinging onto it. But let's get on board with our leading two here. Mason v. Breuer, and that fight for the race lead. Bit of a wide run there out through Bergwerk and towards Kesselchen. It's leaving things very much so up in the air as to who can emerge in the race lead. You can see getting the run on the BMW is the McLaren, but he's going to be tucked in behind him for the most part of this section here, despite its apparent width there from our point of view. It is very hard for our drivers to find that usable space on the inside or outside of any given corner in this section. It is often a case where they hold on for dear life and make the run for it a little later on. Heading down towards Mudkurve. Mason still holding on to that race lead. It's created this big crunch zone behind him because obviously we've seen already that his Pirellis are flagging. That 413 is struggling for apparent grip. And the McLaren and Mercedes are just being held up almost in comparison. The McLaren still has pretty solid tyre life here. The Mercedes has been no slouch either. The BMW is struggling. And as the only one in this competition to field the M4, Mason doesn't really have a frame of comparison within his own ranks. He is the only one here for BMW in round 2 of the championship. With no other cars like it, it's very hard to draw comparisons on this grid. Moreover, when he's fighting totally alien technology by comparison with that mid-engine McLaren clawing at his backside. Out through Hohe Acht. I wouldn't even say you could put the Mercedes in that one as well. I mean, the BMW, it's a super saloon car, and that Mercedes is much more coupe style. They've got broadly different handling characteristics. The BMW is definitely going to feel a little loftier up against the Merc. Heading down towards Eschbach, though. Currently there, down towards Eschbach, and then Brünchen. Mason still leads away from these two, and I must say, he has had an exceptional performance so far. I am expecting, looking at the way that that car has been measured over the course of this lap just gone, and the lap we're in right now on lap 4 of the race, you can see that it's got no grip left. It's surely this is the run to the pit lane that he's been waiting for, and he's called it a little extra lap here. Now that's usually a risk you can afford to do in a smaller track, even say on the GP Strecker that Mason will be likely to see him on next Sunday on the NLRL Sunday League. Actually, sorry, tomorrow, I should say, on the NLRL Sunday League. But on the Nordschleife, it's a tough one to call. Because, of course, you just have so much more distance to cover for that one extra lap. Out through Flansgart and Spy, these three are still absolutely locked in for this fight here. But I do fear the worst for the 413. He's caught really in a bad spot with the Mercedes surfing the slipstream of the McLaren, which we already know has better straight line speed. The only heel to that 570S is the M4, and I think just being served a bit of a Deus Ex Machina there is the BMW of James Mason, because with a slightly worse off run on the exit of the Kleiner Karussell, Tom Breuer has been forced out just a few tenths of a second, and with Aragonese still clawing at his tail here, what is the priority for the German talent in second place here? The 159 started from 19th on this field, and now in the slipstream could take the race lead, but he's towing along with him his rival for the race lead. Now looking up the inside then, has it been solidified? Tom Breuer now up and ahead of James Mason, who loses out the race lead after nearly 60% of the race length covered. 30 minutes left to go. Is this the beckon call for the pit lane run for James Mason? Tom Breuer up into the lead, started from the back, and now he's here. Oh, but into the wall there, mirroring the incident for Pascal Stoltz. That was Tom Breuer into the wall, and this is the perfect time for Mason to dive for the pit lane. Following him is Alberto Aragoneses, but Tom Breuer re-emerges to the race lead, but with a severely damaged vote of confidence there in the 159. That may have just been the saving grace he was searching for. James Mason and Alberto Aragoneses joined by Mr. Scallops now in the pit lane as well. Looking out back, we've got a fight here between Copsey and Belorio. They're on the exit of Wipperman, just heading down towards Eschbach and Brunchen. They're actually into Brunchen now. Looking up the inside, there goes the 97 on the 41. That was tidy for Matthew Copsey for 15th place there over Anthony Velorio. Meanwhile, out back, Stephen Sutton in the number 7 McLaren. These three looking to get into a little scrap of their own here. Let's get a look at the rest of the grid. Right now, we have 4 cars in the pit lane. James Mason, Alberto Aragoneses, Mr. Scallops, and Pascal Stoltz all in the pit lane. That leaves only 2 cars left on this grid with no pit lane run. Tom Breuer and Fabian Hodek. Porsche versus Chevrolet. Where have I seen this one before? Well, out through the Kleiner Karussell, Matthew Copsey, after solidifying that move out through Brunchen, does find a little bit of trouble here on the exit of the Kleiner Karussell. Hefty lump there of grass on his right-hand side has now given opportunity back over to Anthony Velorio. Copsey still has room on the inside there, but that is a door swiftly closing for him, or so we're led to believe. Running high and dry around the outside, it's 6.2 litres to thwart Porsche's 4. That Chevrolet, I mean, it's a one-of-a-kind on this grid, but it was a very present sight back in the GT4 Challenge. It was the very same choice of vehicle Christian Lebay used to win the championship with in the 119. It is a formidable work of automotive witchcraft. It was engineered by the folks over at Pratt Miller Engineering, the same people behind the Corvette C6R, C7R, and C8R to have competed in the IMSA Sports Car Championship and the American Le Mans Series. It was made over in Lansing, Michigan, on the factory floor for Chevrolet. It's based off of the Camaro ZL1, evidenced by its aggressive aero and front bumper design, but unlike the ZL1, it does not feature the LT4 supercharged 6.2-litre V8 engine. As a matter of fact, SRO regulations forbid strictly the use of superchargers in their racing vehicles. So what they had to do at Pratt Miller was get quite creative, and they sourced the LT1 6.2 naturally aspirated version of the engine off of the Camaro SS. And so, while it may be a bit of a Frankenstein's beast, it is one that operates with absolutely brutal efficiency. And it's been a bit of a rough ride today for Anthony Velorio, but he finds himself back up the order from Matthew Copsey. Back up to 15th place. And bear in mind, he was caught up in that incident earlier on. He was in a big pile up down through Brunchen earlier this race. So to have retained a top 15 spot on what has been a very bizarre grid in the GT4 wing, it's nothing to scoff at all. We'll get a look at the overall standings there as it just updates. So what it does give us is the current scope of things here. Tom Breuer leads after starting from the back, and now with the fastest lap of this race, holds on to the mantle 19.2 seconds from the nearest car. But bear in mind, both him and Fabian Hodek, who returns to the front row, have both got to serve their mandatory pit stops. So for the 822, heading his way through Adnau Forst, and for the 159 currently heading down towards Kallenhardt, both of them still have that major block to deal with, that is their run into the pit lane. Now, it's not going to be a particularly long run as they get to leverage the GT wing, which is not a particularly long run at all. We'll be looking at stop times here in and around, I want to say about a minute here for our drivers, so there's still a lot of time to play with. But as we saw, it was a very dramatic change of hands there for the race lead for Tom Breuer, because he had the chances up through Antonio Spucher down towards Tiergarten, as he already got the slipstream off of James Mason, but collided with the wall in a very similar fashion to how Pascal Stoltz did at the start of the first race for the Karussell Cup back in the M2 division last weekend, where he led down towards that area and then collided with the wall, ultimately losing the race lead for good by the end of that race. Now, of course, it's not been anywhere near as severe for Tom Breuer, but it has still been trouble for the 159, overcooking himself in his efforts to get around the 413. Now, with some clean air in his lungs, it could be a broadly different story for Tom Breuer, finally getting a moment to breathe before his run to the pit lane. For Fabian Hodek, it's the same story here. He's definitely had his hands full, especially with a bit more of a hectic race start, a sudden shift in priority as he was gifted that leading position from that disconnect off of Tom Breuer. This is where things would stand, though, in the natural order had it not been for that disconnect. Hodek would have been second, Breuer would have been first. Both of them find themselves still with that pit lane run to serve. One thing to consider, I want to draw this to your attention. Asahi Ota is now up to third place. Alberto Aragoneses is now to fourth, as a recent incident has now pushed James Mason down to fifth place. You can see there, collides with the wall out through the Asphalt Breitscheid. Something is not 100% there with the 413 M4. For Asahi Ota, he could not be more cheerful. That 55 right now stands, as it looks here, about 58 seconds from the lead of this race. With Tom Breuer still to serve that pit lane, if anything goes wrong between now and the pit lane entry, it's Asahi Ota's race to lose. 23 minutes left to go, and this is all riding on the line here for Tom Breuer. For Asahi Ota, this could really be some redemption here. He already found his way to the podium in the M2 wing, but to get back behind the wheel of the Aston Martin, the brand new coat of paint, and back into the iconic 55, right back on the race-winning form. I think it'll be the second time we've seen Ota to the checkered flag first among the fray since Monza, back at the start of the GT4 challenge. Never rule him out. Nearest fight at the moment was between Aragoneses and Mason, but as you can see, it is far from a 7/10 deficit at the last recorded interval there. There's going to be much further north of things, as it's looking a bit sickly at the moment for that 413. I'm not entirely sure what's gone on for him, but he's already lost out on what would have been the provisional lead of this race. Something has gone awry for James Mason, now 2.2 seconds from Alberto Aragoneses. Now, let's take a look at some nearby gaps. Luca Tamburini versus Manuel Amoff would be one to consider as well, as it would have been previously the gap between himself and Jorp Overbeek, who's now far up on a way into 12th place. Close fighting here as Copsey re-engages Valorio, so let's get on board with these two. Bear in mind, this is all down for 15th place on track. Porsche versus Chevrolet. Looking potentially at the inside of Bergwerk. I mean, it is risky, but he's using the titular scale of that 718 to his benefit. Sneaking up on the big cars here, looking for gaps that the others can't. It's something to become very easily acclimatized to when you're in one of the larger vehicles like the Chevrolet, or even contrastingly like, say, for example, the BMW, where it's easy to expect everyone else to be around the same size as you. But when you go toe-to-toe with something like the KTM, the Porsche, or the Alpine, it becomes a broadly different story, because you're having to start consider gaps that even you wouldn't run for. Out through Mudkurve, heading towards Stahlstrecke, then on the exit there of Klostertal. We'll stay on with these two just to observe what has gone on the rest of the grid right now. Things remain as they are since the last update there for James Mason. Still 5th place in this race. Could be on for a podium. Now, that is definitely a chance here for Mason. We are going to check, though, with Tom Breuer as he makes his way. There we go to the pit lane. So it was a salvage run on this lap after a brief upset on the exit of the last lap just gone. Meanwhile, having resorted to a tow to the pit lane is the 813 of Luca Tamburini with Porsche. Something has gone horrifically wrong there for the Argentinian driver. Now back in the pit lane. Emergency stop for the 813. As you can now see peeling into frame, the 159 of Tom Breuer, our race leader, now joined in the pit lane by Fabian Hodek. This is make or break time here for Asahi Ota. And look who he has joining him on his rear bumper. It's no less than Alberto Aragoneses. A potential swap of the entire front row is in the chances here, as making our way out of Antonius Bucher, the gap a lot closer than we had previously thought. We see here with Tom Breuer will be snapping back between the pair. As you can see, coming into the pits, there's Hodek coming to a stop just after that of Luca Tamburini. We'll be watching here between these two. Ota out through Tiergarten. Breuer still yet to have dropped off the jacks. Could it be the race lead lost? He's come off the jacks right now as he rockets his way out of the pits, but is it too close here? Ota chasing him down towards the line. Breuer's lost it. Ota into the lead here in the Nürburgring by a hair's width there, and following down towards turn 1, looking around the outside, up to second goes Alberto Aragoneses. Bear in mind, he has done this at possibly the worst time because those are brand new tyres on Tom Breuer's McLaren. And once those do get into heat, and trust me, it will not take a long time for that to happen. We also see in the pits there is Stephen Sutton in the number 7 car. The moment that the heat starts to build on that 159, it could be serious hell to pay for in the last 19 minutes of racing. This has seriously picked up into a proper show for the race lead. It has changed hands so many times here that we've lost count, but now we find ourselves in the scope of the fight for second. Breuer still in pursuit. You can see the gap is starting to dwindle almost immediately. We've not even left the GP section of the track before we started seeing gains in time here for the 159. Now the question there and remains, second place is definitely up for grabs, but is first? It was a real gamble to play for Asahi Ota. Things have gone very much so in his favour over the course of this race. He's been very lucky in some parts today, as the Nürburgring is often indiscriminate in who it chooses to push up through the order and who it chooses to smite down with reckless abandon. The 55 has seemingly mastered for the greatest part of today the certain trials and tribulations GT4 faces here at the Nordschleife, but for how much longer can he hold that against the imminent tide of the 159 of Tom Breuer? Let's not count out James Mason in all of this, though. You can see him in the background there by 2 seconds. The 413 still has the chance here, as just as much as things have gone south for him at a number of occasions over the course of both this race and last, it can do even much more to Tom Breuer and Alberto Aragoneses. It is not really picky in who it chooses to slam. Out through, looking at it here, out through Hatzenbecks into Torneichen. A little bit of upset there for Aragoneses in the 104. He's still holding on to it, though. All of this is just inviting in the 159, and it's also building a lovely gap indeed for the Aston Martin of Asahi Ota. He will not be arguing with what goes on behind him on this podium. The simple reality of it is, for that 55, he really just does not care who's in second place, so long as they're far enough away. Just to bring to note something there, 413 dropping now down quite a considerable distance. We're just going to quickly get an update here. We also see a slow warning for the number 12. This is Tom Wells actually in trouble here, and that could bring out the yellow flags. This is just as we make our way, by looks of it here, through, yes, that is Hatzenbecksborgen, down towards Vidal. So we had a slow car warning for the number 12. We also had a brief lapse in telemetry data there for the 413. That did leave us worrying for James Mason. He does still find himself 4th place though at the moment, 4.5 seconds from Tom Breuer, so a gap has definitely opened up between himself and the 3rd place McLaren out through Adenauer. Well, let's get a look back on board then with Breuer, Aragoneses and Ota as we see things come to a head here. Breuer in that fight for 2nd place. Let's see if we can get the defending point of view in this all, getting on board with Alberto Aragoneses. "16 minutes left to go in this race. Bear in mind, for some of these drivers as well today, we'll be seeing them a little later on in the XCL Pro Series race that we're set to host the broadcast for round 5 of the championship coming up at 7:50 p.m. GMT. We did see into the wall there was Alberto Aragoneses. We also see a slow car warning for the 22. That's Heinz Harzer with Aston Martin down in the Hatzenbeck section of the Nordschleife. He's down in 16th place in trouble there. That was the yellow flags out in that area. back onto that topic, we will be seeing quite a few of these drivers later on. We're set to host that 5th round of the championship. 2 hours of racing to follow in the land down under as we head towards Bathurst, New South Wales, Australia, at a real favourite circuit of ours, at the Mount Panorama circuit. Down towards Bergwerk. Still watching here with Aragoneses, who's really rolled with the punches. Quite a few punches, as a matter of fact, landed on that 104. Most recently with the wall. You can see in this straightaway area here down through Kesselchen Mutkurve, it's just where the McLaren has free reign of whomever it chooses. It is pound for pound the fastest in GT4. I mean, some even make the assertion that this GT4 McLaren possesses the same straight line speed as a bottom end GT3, and I don't disprove that. It is an absolute bullet, as we've seen already down the Dottinger, as we've seen down through this area, just gone through Kesselchen Mutkurve and in towards Klostertal and Stahlstrecke, and what we've also seen on the run down through Kottenborn, Schwedenkreuz. We'll also see a little bit of it through Flansgarten, but I think we're going to definitely see the majority of that down the Dottinger once again. But if he can stay in this current stead on Alberto Aragoneses, there is very little to throw his chances away of being in second place. And this is something to reintroduce to the mix here. Asahi Yota has dropped considerable lengths of time over these two. It was a comfortable gap towards the start of lap 6, where it was about 3 seconds between himself and Tom Breuer. Now he finds himself not even within 2. He's well under that 2-second margin front to back there. It's 7/10 of a second apiece front to back between Aragoneses and Ota, and Aragoneses and Breuer. Finds himself almost dead level in this fight here as we make our way out towards the run of Eschbach and Brünchen. Out through Brünchen, then the Aston Martin is looking a little bit ropey in through this section here. He's dropping a lot of time off to Mercedes and McLaren. He's trying to balance things out here. You can see that it's slowly dripping away from him, though. It was definitely north of a second for some time now. It's really hopeful to be even north of half a second out through Sprunghurgel in towards Flansgarten 2. Now, we know in terms of pound for pound straight line speed, doesn't matter if he's in the slipstream or not, Aragoneses just cannot catch Ota with the setup he has on that Mercedes. Whatever's gone on at Aston Martin between the M178 engine that AMG license sold to them and the M177 that they ended up co-producing, it has given that V8 advantage just a little smidge more in the straight line department. But for how much longer is that going to ring true? As of course, with McLaren hanging out back there, we know how fast that 570S, we've seen that 570S is. We know how well it can take positions down the Dottinger, and it's got 2 practically for the price of 1 here as we head in towards Galgenkopf. It may even be the chances here for Aragoneses to come and have a pop at the race lead. He was fighting for second, but make no mistake of it now as we head out of Galgenkopf, this is the race leading fight, as it's 0.1 of a second between the Merc, between the Aston, but then if you look out back, it's just over half a second between the Merc and the McLaren. Now all 3 of them trying to cling to one another here in the slipstream. Asahi Ota trying to cut the toe off of Aragoneses. Alberto Aragoneses trying to cut the toe off of Tom Breuer. It can go any which way here. But as you can see, reeling him in, this is for second place. Aragoneses is hopeless to fight against the 159. Tom Breuer just breezes on by. It's a night and day difference between Mercedes and McLaren. Heading down towards Tiergarten. This was an area that Breuer found difficulties in the last couple of laps. No dice for him this time around as we make our way onto the GP section. He's tucked into the slipstream of Asahi Ota. This is where things could get very, very dicey for them as we try and get on board feverishly so here with Tom Breuer and Asahi Ota down towards the Yokohama S's, trying for around the outside of the first part, inside for the second. Let's see how it pans out. The 55 and the 159 side by side. Tom Breuer now at the inside on the exit of the Yokohamas and surfing his way through. There is Alberto Aragoneses, and now up to the lead from the back to the front, it's Tom Breuer. I do not quite know how to exactly explain what I am seeing in front of my eyes here, folks, but this is nothing short of absolute brilliance from Tom Breuer. The 159, we've seen him several times with his compatriots in the NRW Performance team, but standing alone on his own 2 feet, 10 toes on business, I do not think I have ever seen anything quite like this. But it's not over yet. Let's not call things a little too early. Arrogant Aces is practically pushing him up the Schumacher S's. And all of this is giving rise to the Aston Martin's sudden spring of confidence here. Asahi Ota looks to be back into the fight now for second place as he dropped back 2 positions through the Yokohama S's at the start of lap 7. Down towards the Vidal chicane. This is just Tom Breuer in his element now. And off in the background, that's Asahi Ota into the wall. Oh my goodness, out through Vidal. Just where we thought the chances were there for him. That's going to give James Mason 3rd place. But Asahi Ota has come off at the track here. And the first part, the back end kicked away under the curbs at the Vidal chicane. Into the wall goes the Aston Martin. Oh my goodness, that is a horrible, horrible sight for him there. Fortunately, he's re-emerged in 4th place, so he still has the chance to fight for a podium, but it has all come asunder for Asahi Ota. His best chances in today's race is going to be 3rd. The 159 and the 104 are left out by their lonesome to fight for what's left of the podium here. Tom Breuer re-emerges to the race lead. 8.5 minutes left to go, so the next lap coming will be our last. Actually, having a look at it here, this could be the last lap of the entire race that we're on right now. No, actually, no. We will have one more. Just had to redo the maths there. We will have at least one more lap before the end of this race. We'll be cutting it very, very close here. So Tom Breuer still has one more lap to play for onto lap 8 next time around. Looking around the field, it's a bittersweet sight for Asahi Ota. He's managed to escape that incident with minimal, if any, damage to the Aston, but he now finds himself looking at the back of the top 3 and wondering if he can still be part of it in the next 7.5 minutes. Lap and a half, really, of racing for him left before the checkered flag. 2 third places is nothing to scoff at. It's definitely going to be the consistency in points measurement that he needs to take on the championship lead by the time we get into the GT3s. Now, this is going to be a very bizarre one for Asahi Ota because, as far as memory does concern, I don't think we've ever seen here on TRTN what the Japanese talent is capable of behind the wheel of the premier class of ACC. So it's going to leave up to the imagination, really, what Ota can do. And also, what will his choice of car be? We, of course, know his affinity for all things Aston Martin, but does that carry all the way to GT3? Knowing that the V8 Vantage is not the most competitive machine in the paddock, we definitely would see plenty of drivers who are big Aston Martin fans don't often gravitate towards the V8 Vantage. I mean, there's only a few such occasions where we've seen the contrary. We know that Christian LeBay is a big Aston Martin fan in GT3, but opts for Chevrolet down in GT4. But oh, sideways again! This time again for Asahi Ota. It has gone from bad to worse for the 55 off of Vidal. And then, as we saw there, making our way in towards Kallenhardt, off again. That could be a free position for Mr. Scallops. Is Asahi Ota looking to get towards the back of the top 5 by the end of this race here? 6 minutes left to go, and it looks like damage, but not too severe, so it seems, for the 55. Out through the asphalt. It is not looking good for him. Having a quick glance around the field, we can see Copsey v Wells. I mean, we've seen these two go tit for tat in the GT4s many a time. I don't think in situations quite like the one today. Maserati, now the car of choice for Tom Wells. We spoke of this several times, how bizarre it crosses my mind that Tom Wells would be considering anything of the sort. The number 12 currently defending for 12th place. Stay on board with him in his fight against Matthew Copsey. They make their way in towards the Adenauer Force. The Porsche looking for any kind of gap, but there, the back end swinging away on that wily Aston Martin. Not Aston Martin, Maserati. Still got my mind focused on that fight from earlier. It was very much so a Maserati. Still a very foreign concept to us here on TRTN. First time ever we've seen a Maserati. On the grid, at least. I've seen one in real life. Do know what they are. In towards Kallenhardt. Now, if I were a thinking man, and I've had quite a few of my clients discuss the opportunities for single make championships with slightly more unorthodox choice of machines, and if you are listening in and you know who you are, this could be an interesting little choice here for a single make car. The Maseratis, they don't really get the limelight all too much in GT4. They've been quite honoured to have it today, as the only two Maseratis are driven by Pascal Stoltz and Tom Wells, two already recognised names here on HCCL. But I think a single make series of Maseratis is not too far off a shout. That could be something worth discussing in the near future. We've seen some great success with single make series in the last couple of months. I think one such example of an event still going on at this time has been that of the Competizione Performance League Jaguar GT3 Revival Series. I think maybe a follow-up act to that for 2026 could be the Maserati GT4 Revival Series. This is a very unpopular, let's put it, choice of GT4, and for all the right reasons. It is not very competitive. In the nicest possible way, it is never going to be the kind of car you see up at the front. It has got, I'm pretty sure, no assists on that Maserati, or little to no assists, and that's why, bar the few risk takers we see, like Tom Wells, who's not shied away from a challenge like this in a long time. I mean, he ran Ginetta for the entirety of the GT4 challenge, a car that is also considered to not be very competitive in its own right, but he has made a very solid work of it there. Perhaps there could be the opportunities for Maserati in the near future. We'll cut away from these two here as things continue to rage on. We want to get a look up front here just to quickly see what's the scope of things heading in towards the Schwabenschwanz between Aragoneses and Breuer. And you can actually see it's dropped to within a second, but heading towards the Dottinger. Here, just watch with the number 104, the Mercedes here, the night and day difference on display between Mercedes and McLaren's power plants here. The M838 versus the M178. Now on the exit of Galgenkopf, 0.8 of a second now as we make our way up towards top gear. Now 0.9, you can start to see the data fluctuate there in the bottom left-hand side. Now up to a second. This is where it starts to take off here, because that's a very quick procession now. 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 there as we make our way up towards Antonios Bucher, 1.4. So it's really at the very top end where the McLaren has Mercedes beat. You see here, this is Rafael Bayer, a driver who's gone under the radar for the majority of this race here. We make our way onto the final lap with the 159 and the 104 coming up then. We're on to that final act here in the Nürburgring.
Okay, the leader is on the final lap now. Give it all you can.
And as evidenced there by the heads up, we are now officially on that final lap. On with Rafael Bayer. Now into the top 10, so nothing to scoff at there for Audi, especially considering what looks to have definitely been a bit of a up and down sort of race for him today. He actually doesn't find himself too far off the chances for 8th place. There's 4.5 seconds up the road, and he'll be hanging sort of out to dry here is that 84 Alpine, the 1.8 litre 4-sil versus the 5.2 litre 10-sil. So a lot to consider in terms of that engine fight. Looking at where things stand, though, we do have a yellow flag out, and it's for the 97. Oh, my goodness, no. It is Matthew Copsey in trouble. He's had to re-emerge from the pit lane there, but he had the yellow flags out, so that would have indicated an emergency stop for Matthew Copsey. And since he's had to re-emerge onto the track, he's already down at the GP section. He was trailing from Tom Wells, who's just come out of the Kleiner Karussell. That does confirm to us at the worst of suspicions that, yes, Matthew Copsey did have to make an emergency stop. He's a lap down, and so we'll continue to drop time away over Jorp, over Beek, over Anthony Valorio, over Heinz Herzer, or Hartzer even, over Luca Tamburini, so on and so forth. That does also quell what has been one of the closest fights in the latter part of this race. We now take a look here to another fight going on. It's Chevrolet versus Porsche again, but this time, instead of it being Copsey v Valorio, it's Valorio versus Jorp Overbeek. And Jorp Overbeek has been a driver that we've not really
had too much to say about over the course of this race. He's been lurking around in the background for some time today. We're on here. This is your Boverbeek in the 284. Now being taken over for position there by Anthony Valorio. 8 cylinders against 6. Was never really a winning matchup for him. But still holds on to right now a top 15 position. And I think for his first race in this series, you can still hold on to a pretty solid example of everything here. And that's just decent points on the chart. And that actually could be more points for him because Manuel Lamoth is back into the pit lane. The 91, I think, has made an emergency stop. So, yeah, that's a free position. And then some as well when you consider the 97 is a lap down. So for your Boverbeek, that has really turned around in his favor where he may have lost a position to Valorio. He's gained 2 back. So it's all come back nice and dandy for the 284 Porsche. Bear in mind, though, he still has 1 more lap to play with. Looking at where things stand then. Nearest fights going on at the moment. We see here Asahi Ota versus Fabian Hodek. This is for 6th place. Let's see if we can go and catch on board with either of these two. We see James Mason could be getting pressured here for position by Mr. Scallops. Mason will not be arguing with being back on the podium, especially with where his race went in the last 10 to 20 minutes here at the Nordschleife, but he still has to fight all the way to the checkered flag, so we'll keep an eye on that one as it proceeds. But let's see if we can catch on board with these two before we run out of time. And heading over towards what looks at it here, the run down towards Cottonbourne, up towards... Looking at it here on the map, Schwedenkreuz, Auenberg and Poststrasse. On with Asahi Ota versus Fabian Hodek. Now, Hodek started on that front row, actually started from pole after that disconnect from the 159 of Breuer. Now has the chances to have a chance to fight for 6th place. Considering that for many drivers, including him, it has been a massive change of fate over the course of this race, many a time. The chance to be in 6th after all things said and done, it's nothing to scoff at. It's a solid point scoring position at the end of the day. Something to point out, though, that gap is getting dangerously close between Mason and Scallops. There is definitely the consideration coming up in the next couple of minutes here, to maybe even the next couple of seconds on this track, to a fight between those two. We watch here with Asahi Ota defending for his life here for 6th place on track, just trying to salvage what remains of this drive today. The Aston Martin has been a bit of a handful for him, and he has seen things, especially in that latter half of the race, come apart at the seams. Now making his way down through Metzgerfeld in towards Kallenhardt. Up the road from him, his fellow Aston Martin there, Václav Pospisil in the number 34. 3.6 seconds out as we make our way out of Kallenhardt. We'll catch up with these two in a moment's time. Just take a look around the field here as we see Tom Wells. Looks to have been running a little slow there out of... that was the run out of Hoheneichen in towards the Kittelbacher. A little bit confusing there what's gone on for the number 12. He's in the top 10. On board with Scallops then, in his fight currently for the last of those podium positions. The 394 has got the BMW in the palm of his hand here, out through the Asphalt Breitscheid. This is where things can get very juicy for the 394. He knows he can stay in the slipstream for a decent amount of time in the next section coming up, and that's going to give him a very good run of things for that final sector where he's going to have to go absolutely hells for bells if he means to stay with the BMW for that pivotal run down the Dottinger. It's all gearing up for these two major action spots. Anything else that comes before or after that is just a bonus. Quickly cutting away from these two again to get back on board with Hodek. So we can cut between these two here. This is the fight for 6th place. This is the fight for 3rd. Out through Kesselchen, in towards Mudkurve. On with Hodek, you can see it is getting very dicey for him there. And another trip over the curbs with a 55 opens the gap in through Mudkurve, in towards Klostertal. Can it be up to 6th place for Fabian Hodek? It can. Looking further up the road, it's really not too far a distance now. The only buffer zone is Václav Pospisil's number 34 Aston between these two fights in that top 10. This is the fight for 3rd place. Mr. Scallops still pursuing James Mason, who's looking to recover what's left of today's fight to put himself on the podium. Nothing to scoff at after the things he's been through today. A result still decent to walk away with.
Of course, he'll still be lamenting what could have been of today's race. He led for so long. Mason now is just looking hopeful to be on the podium by the end of round 2. We also just quickly take a look up the road here. It's 2.2 seconds, the gap now between himself and Tom Breuer, who looks to outright dominate this race. And what I must say, in terms of our coverage of all things HCCL, is the most bizarre performance I think I've ever seen in my time commentating for the High Caliber Community League. To see a driver qualify on pole, disconnect, start from the back of a 19-car grid at the Nordschleife and return to the race lead, not once, but twice, is truly bizarre. Admittedly, his setback in the second part was mostly on strategy. The fact that he was still able to come through and fight for the race lead, it stands upon some of the greatest achievements in driving we've ever seen in the High Caliber Community League, at least in terms of its coverage here on TRTN. I can't speak for the entirety of this fantastic league. 28 has a drive-through penalty. That's trouble for Rafael Bayer with Audi. So big trouble for him there right on the final lap. Horrible time for that to have come through for him. Looking here with Scallops and Mason. They're out through Flanskart and Svai. Absolutely hell for leather here. Meanwhile, looking out back, Hodek has got a sizable gap over Asahio to 2.4 seconds. Looking in with these two. Heading towards a Kleiner Karussell on the exit of the Schwalbenschwanz. Big run out though for Scallops. He'll be fortunate to keep that one in the white lines, and he very just does. The 284 is into the pit lane on the final lap there. An emergency retirement for Jorp Overbeek. Not a way to end the race, but sadly that is often the case here at the Nürburgring. It is a brutal track, make no mistake of it. Let's get on board, though, with Tom Breuer, because this has been nothing short of excellence today out of the 159. He was such a last-second signing to this championship. Sadly, we don't even have the graphic for him, but something is definitely true of his drive today. He is a race winner here in round 2 of the Karussell Cup. Tom Breuer wins in the Nürburgring. An absolutely formidable drive, unlike anything we have ever seen. Last to first in the Nords, and with pit strategy against him, he still did it all. The 159 wins in round 2, and the GT4 wing Aragonesis in second, and riding the wave all the way to the line here, James Mason in hot pursuit by the 394 of Mr. Scallops, just edges this one out to third. And a brilliant result then for the 413. Escapes losing the podium by 0.3 of a second. Mr. Scallops in fourth. Václav Pospisil on his first race with Aston Martin in this championship is in fifth. A great result. Fabian Hodek in sixth with Asahio to seventh. Thomas Ferre with Alpine. Still some distance to go here down the Dottinger, but he's looking at his chances for 8th place. A great result for the Alpine. Bear in mind for Ferre, he was 4th out of the last race. He's coming to this with definitely the odds stacked against him in terms of machine choice. The Alpine was never going to be beating McLaren or Mercedes in a straight line, but it is still going to come away from this race today having beat majority of the grid into that top 10. The titular Alpine then, 1.8 litres. Good things come in small packages. The A110 to 8th. And then, a sight I don't think I'd ever see or ever think I'd say for a race in my time commentating for GT4. Maserati, not only 9th, but 10th as well. 2 Maseratis against the odds to the top 10. Pascal Stoltz 9th, Tom Wells in 10th. We see here Tom Wells coming out through Antonio Spucher down towards Tiergarten. Number 12, not far from the line here. I mean, he's going to walk away with a sensational result here. Tom Wells. I mean, the odds were definitely stacked against him. There was not too high an expectation getting behind the wheel of the Maserati to see a solid result today, to be in the top 10 and to be one of 2 Maseratis to make the top 10 against the odds here in the Nürburgring. It is a real achievement for the number 12. He's 10 for the end of round 2. Coming to the line, not far from his position, 3.7 seconds out to 11th place. Anthony Valorio surfacing against the odds there in the 41 Chevrolet. Manuel Lamoth on his way to the line, the number 12. Not number 12, the number 91 in 12th, I should say. The actual number 12 was Tom Wells. He's 10th. Here comes Manuel Lamoth to the line. In 12th place. They're not far from his position. Is Heinz Harzer down through Tiergarten. Job Overbeek is a lap down. He'll be finishing at the best of times here, 14th place. We also see a driver out on track at the moment. That's Luca Tamburini. He looks to be finishing 17th. That could actually be more positions up because of the drivers around him with drive-throughs, with emergency stops. They'll be laps down over Tamburini, but we'll see whether or not that is the case for him. The 284 is seemingly 14th place, and we are going to find ourselves, by looks of it, in a bit of an unfortunate spot. Definitely looking at it, because much like the M2s, a lot of these drivers are left unaccounted for. And Tamburini, oh my goodness. That's down at Tiergarten. That's right before the checkered flag. Oh goodness. That's not good. We'll cut away from that just to save them the indignity. You can see here, many drivers lining up on the exit of turn 1 in that Yokohama SS. Among them, we're seeing here Pospisil. We're also seeing the number 22. That's Heinz Harzer. We see here the 41, the Chevrolet of Anthony Villorio. We can also see James Mason in the 413, the 104 of Alberto Aragoneses, and your race winner, Tom Breuer, in the number 159. We also see that's Fabian Hodek in the number 822, and Tom Wells in the number 12 Maserati. Also alongside him there, you can see is the number 50, not number 51, the number 91. That's Manuel Lamoth, and the number 97 of Matthew Copsey. Yeah, but we do find ourselves in a bit of an unfortunate spot because a lot of drivers are left unaccounted for actual finishing standing. And they're sort of forced to go out for another lap here. Rafael Bayer has now found himself to 14th place. But we do find ourselves with plenty of drivers still with a chapter left to tell here. And with Tamburini and Sutton back into the pit lane here, those could account for DNFs. Very likely so. So some of the major takeaways from today's race. Tom Breuer, I mean, that is a man possessed. I don't think I've seen a performance quite like that in a GT4 in a good while. The 159 started, obviously, on pole. Then that disconnect happened. He started down in 19th. Fought to the lead. Then had the pit strategy sway against him after he crashed at Tiergarten just as the drivers he was fighting with dived to the pit lane. So he was already kind of put under the bus there for the pit lane strategy. He knew he was going to fall victim to an undercut and still emerged from that undercut in the chance to fight for the race lead and fought back to it and did all of that within the span of 75 minutes of racing. I mean, that is something else for the 159. Better late than never for the debut of Tom Breuer, but he has come with a vengeance to this championship, and one shudders to imagine what he's capable of when we move to the GT3s next weekend. Of course, looking into that calendar, it's the last round coming up on December 13th at the same time as this one. We'll be heading into 90 minutes of racing for the season finale of the Karussell Cup with the GT3s, the long-awaited category for this championship. I'm sure we're all looking forward to seeing how they'll fare. We've seen plenty of races for GT3. Only a handful of them have ever visited the Nürburgring Nordschleife in its entirety. This is set to be a very exciting season finale coming up. That's also following on a double stint of events for that weekend on December 14th, the Sunday next coming. We'll be also on with HCCL's 2.4 hours of Spa for St. Jude's Children's Hospital. It's a charity race coming up, and that's 2.4 hour endurance race coming up out of Spa-Francorchamps. We've also got a whole swarm of events coming up in the next week as well, including events for the Competizione Performance League, VSR Phoenix, NLRL, HCCL, and it's going to be quite a fun weekend indeed. In terms of what's coming up later on today, don't go anywhere here on TRTM. We'll be back in a few hours' time after today's broadcast to come to you live for round 5 of the midway mark of the XCL Pro Series Championship. We'll be heading into 2 hours of racing out of Mount Panorama, and that's going to be a very exciting race, especially with the way things have swayed out of the last round, just gone in a very controversial bout of rain on the Watkins Glen circuit back in Schuyler County, New York State in round 4 of the championship back then. We've also got coming up tomorrow the return of the NLRL Sunday League coming up tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. GMT. After that week-long delay because of technical difficulties regarding PlayStation Network, we'll be returning back here at the Nürburgring, though not at the Nordschleife. We'll be on the GP Strecker for a double stint race at round 6 of the championship. Coming up next week, we're back in with the Competizione Performance League, heading to Alton Park for the penultimate round of the GT3 Revival Series for Jaguar. And we've also got coming up on Wednesday as well another round for VSR Phoenix, as I believe we actually move over to, I want to say it's Bathurst, I might be wrong on that one. For the Saturday events coming up next week, we're back with HCCL for the finale round of the Karussell Cup, coming up same time as today. We've also got the 6 hours of Silverstone for the NLRL Console Endurance Series coming up. That also got delayed because of those PSN outages last week. We'll be coming up with that on Saturday, and then on Sunday we've got the 2.4 hours of Spa for St Jude's Children's Hospital live here on HCCL, and also we've got another round of the NLRL Sunday League. So the next 2 weeks are looking lively here, and with the next 48 hours set to be jam-packed with even more racing, we do thoroughly look forward to seeing how things pan out. Still wait to see exactly that full result, but we have got that session marker here, where people are effectively still waiting to be received at the checkered flag here. Matthew Copsey down towards the line, but he's took the infield lap there. But that's not going to count towards a lap at all. It's just going to be looping back on his current set of lap times. You see here, James Mason now a little bit, he's definitely gotten a little bit bored waiting for the event to end, and believe me, he's not alone in that assertion. I'm sure a lot of these drivers do want to wrap up here, get ready for the next race. We do have to wait around for some of the other drivers. We also see most recent results to have come through. Rafael Bayer in 12th at the end of that race for Audi. Still waiting to see then what is the current going rates for Europe. Overbeek and the number 284 Porsche 718 Cayman. He's currently 13th with Copsey, Tamburini and Sutton all retiring to the pit lane. Again, some of the major takeaways we've seen out of today's race was 2 Maseratis in the top 10 and Alpine in the top 10. Moreover, BMW on the podium after a very topsy-turvy kind of race for James Mason. He's emerged finally back onto the podium here after a long drive. We've also seen a lot of drivers have been struggling with technical problems as well. High ping for quite a few drivers. Stoltz, Hodek, Aragoneses, and even Breuer. We saw that disconnect right at the very start of the race for him as well. We see drivers start to drop away here, but we've got to stick around to see what the final results are concerned with for the sake of data keeping. The bottom line, though, your race winner for round 2 of the championship is Tom Breuer, who joins the list of race-winning names here in the Karussell Cup. Last round's race winner was that of Matthew Copsey in the M2 division. It's sort of just a bit of a waiting game now, really, for what's set to follow. Also, something to pick up as well, I think we spoke about this a long time ago, was McLaren's measured success in the GT4 Challenge. It would be naive of me not to include the fact that Flitzer Flop was another McLaren driver who picked up a win back in Hungary. With a pitch in there in chat from Rafael Bayer saying the explanation for the brakes of the Audi, sometimes doesn't brake like they're supposed to, so the Audi brakes are truly horrible. Yeah, we've seen that to be one of the major complaints universally of anyone who's taken the Audi under their wing as one of the major flaws of the R8's design. It's a phenomenal engine, the 5.2, but it's just not tethered to anything able to keep it in line. The braking system on the Audi is probably, I'd say, either the worst or second worst in the entire GT4 category. So they're really playing against a bit of a rigged hand here. They've got an otherwise fairly competitive platform, but it's just not chained together with good brakes. And we saw that to be an issue today for Rafael Bayer. Same complaint has been leveraged against BMW as well. I mean, to have brought himself to a podium at the end of this race, James Mason really did have to play against quite a hard set of circumstances, as the brakes aren't much peachier for the M4. We still wait to see what is the final tally of results here. Joop Overbeek to the line from 11th place to finish this race. Matthew Copsey still has to complete a lap, and so too does Luca Tamburini. Both of them still classified as having run in this race. So unless they return to the pits, I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen here, how much longer we're expected to wait. We'll get the full results as and when they can arrive. Then the only driver we're waiting on now is Copsey. Not 100% sure on that, but seems to be the one thing stopping the session from ending right now is that not all of the drivers have been left accounted for. And that's the one major issue we faced since the start of the championship with the M2s. Everyone joins in a bit of celebratory donuts at the end of round 2. Season's not yet over. Still one more race left to decide things. No, with Copsey back in the pits, it just kind of leaves us stranded then. We don't exactly know what is the finishing parameters for this race. We do just have to wait around for the very end of things. Bit of donuts there in the foreground from the 413. And surprisingly clean with it. So the sort of behind-the-scenes stuff you don't really often get to see from the paddock, because this is just the drivers winding down now. Often you don't get these bits on the broadcast. It's always curious to see what ends up happening normally when the cameras switch off. But because we are so behind in terms of the overall results arriving, we kind of just get to see what the drivers do when left to their own devices here. It is quite curious. They're watching inside an enclosure at the zoo. But there's your final results coming up. Tom Breuer wins in round 2. Alberto Aragonesis in 2nd. James Mason 3rd with Mr. Scallops in 4th. Václav Pospisil in 5th with Fabian Hodek in 6th place. Asahi Ota in 7th with Thomas Ferre 8th. Pascal Stoltz 9th and Tom Wells to round out the top 10. Anthony Valorio in 11th with Manuel Lamoff in 12th place. Heinz Hartze in 13th. Rafael Bayer in 14th and Jorp Overbeek in 15th. 3 technical DNFs from Copsey, Tamburini and Sutton, as well as Silva. So that's 4 DNFs, 3 on technicality, 1 overall. That was Silva, who crashed out of this race early doors 8 laps ago, as a matter of fact, in the 31 Porsche. But that's the end of the road here from us here on TRTN. If you'll be joining us later on, it'll be for round 5 of the XCL Pro Series, live from New South Wales, Australia. That's coming up at 7:50 p.m. GMT, if you're listening in from the UK. Otherwise, that's all from us here on TRTN. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and take care. Good day.